Hello and welcome to today's Building a Next Generation Data Center EcoCast event produced by ActualTech Media. My name is David Davis and I'm excited to be your moderator on today's event. We have a great lineup for you today. You'll hear from expert presenters from PureStorage, Western Digital, DriveScale, Nutanix, and Veeam with NetApp. And to top it all off, we also have a special keynote interview with Mr. Bill Clayman, blogger, author, speaker at Data Center World, and Executive VP of Digital Solutions at Switch. Before we kick off today's presentation, I want to give you a little bit of background on the EcoCast event and do some quick housekeeping. So if you haven't been on these events before, we created the EcoCast and MegaCast event series to help you as IT professionals learn about the most innovative enterprise-grade IT solutions available to you today to help you to do it all in one place, quickly and efficiently. You don't have to go downtown to the convention center or anything like that. We want you to get all your questions answered. We want this to be a very educational event, and we hope to make the whole event fun with some cool prizes. Now, on today's event, I mentioned prizes. I'll talk more about those in just a moment. I want to call your attention to the questions box there on your audience console. The console that you see in the web browser is kind of like a windowed operating system. You can take the questions box, you can drag it around if you click on the title bar, you can resize it by clicking on the corner, and you can do the same thing with the slides window. So I encourage you to maximize those windows, place them on your desktop so that you can get the most benefit out of today's event, because you will see architectural diagrams, you'll see videos, live demos, all sorts of cool things will appear in the slides window, so you want that as large as possible, but you also want the questions box there visible so that you can ask questions as you go along. I'll also have some poll questions for you out there in the audience, and I'll be sharing the results of most of those poll questions with you so you can see how you stack up with your peers. Now, we want this to be a social event as well, so I'll be talking about the hashtag for the event in just a moment, but the cool thing is you can actually tweet directly from your console using the Twitter icon, and the hashtag will be automatically appended. And then finally, we have some hand-selected resources from today's presenters. You'll find those in the Handouts tab, which is just to the right of the questions box there on the audience console. So if you click on that right now, that Handouts tab, you can go in there and you can download all the PDF resources that are associated with today's presentations, and some of those are actually really cool, so make sure you check those out, like full ebooks. We'll be giving away 3 $500 Tango gift cards on today's event. If you aren't familiar with Tango gift cards, the cool thing about these is that they can actually be exchanged for gift cards at just about any place you can think of. Amazon, Apple, Best Buy, restaurants. They can even be donated directly to charity, and the cool thing is that they never expire. And that's why we've moved over to handing out the Tango gift cards instead of gift cards from a specific company, to give you all out there in the audience as prize winners the ultimate flexibility to exchange these gift cards for whatever you would like. Now, the requirements to be eligible for the prize drawings, you can actually find those if you go to the Handouts tab and scroll to the bottom. There's a link right there to our prize terms and conditions. You must be present on the live event to be eligible at all. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry, these drawings have already occurred. Now, through the EcoCast and MegaCast event series, we've given out thousands of dollars to the charities you see on the screen here, thanks to generous prize winners who choose to donate their prize values to charity. If you'd like to do that, we would love to help make that possible. Now, today's hashtag is Data Center EcoCast, and I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. I'll be monitoring that hashtag, retweeting and commenting to just about anyone who uses it. Today's event is produced by ActualTech Media. You can follow us on Twitter, and I am David M. Davis on Twitter as well. So feel free to reach out, follow, and say hi. You can also subscribe to ActualTech Media resources on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and our 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes Store. And without further delay, let's kick off today's keynote interview.
I'm excited to be joined by Mr. Bill Clayman, Executive Vice President of Digital Solutions at Switch, also a well-known blogger, author, speaker. In fact, Bill is one of the most energetic and passionate people I think I've ever met in the world of technology. It's great to have you on, Bill.
Oh my God, David, it is a pleasure to be here, and I assure you I'm fully caffeinated for this conversation. It's going to be just as fun as hopefully you expect it to be.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Bill, I know you recently spoke at Data Center World 2019, where you gave the keynote address in front of, I think it was thousands of people. And on that keynote, you discussed your findings from the 2019 State of the Data Center report, which you co-authored. Is that right?
Absolutely. It was a beautiful event. I got to escape the polar vortex that was a Chicago winter and presented beautiful and sunny Phoenix. So yes, absolutely.
Cool, cool. So I want to have you on today, and let's chat a little bit about, what you learned in this report. In fact, we talked about this report last year. It was a great report. You learned a lot, and I'm sure between now and then, you've learned even more. So, I reviewed your report. I reviewed the presentation, which was fantastic, by the way. And one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is, what do you see as the greatest threat to data center security?
That's a really good question to start with, right? Let's go with the doom and gloom, and then we'll brighten things up a little bit later. So, listen, the number one response that we got from everybody was ransomware, right? This protection of data that's within the data center, which is absolutely critical to understand and work with. Working with outside human threats, advanced persistent threats, and DDoS absolutely made the list. I mean, if you remember, David, and everybody listening, what happened to GitHub just in February, 1.35 terabit DDoS attack. I mean, the biggest one we've ever experienced in our industry. So what is actually frightening data center leaders is the hijacking of data, people either accidentally or maliciously getting access to infrastructure, both physical infrastructure as well as data, and then the outage of services. Because I'm going to leave with everyone with this one thought: slow is the new down in our industry. So even if something becomes only slightly unavailable, you're going to lose productivity for your users, and all of a sudden your brand, your services are all impacted. So these biggest threats revolve around obviously the hijacking of data, physical as well as data-based security threats, and obviously things like DDoS.
Okay. Scary. Yeah, scary time. That's a ton of DDoS traffic. I don't know. I mean, there's no company that could thwart that off. I don't think. I don't know. But
no, there's ways you can overcome it. Just make sure you focus on your connectivity. If there's good DDoS mitigation tools that are with your provider, for example, right, you can block off different pipes that are potentially getting flooded. But when you're getting hit with a 1.35 terabit attack, that's going to be pretty challenging. But there are ways you can prepare yourself.
Okay, good to know. So another question here, and kind of a follow-up. I mean, so what's the greatest threat to the data center business? Is it really the cloud? Is the cloud replacing the data center?
I love that you're asking me this question. So I stood up on stage, and it was literally, I think, the last thing that people upvoted. You could actually do a question in the crowd. And people asked me, Bill, could you on stage for the final time just kill this rumor that cloud is here to replace the data center? And we're doing it on this official webcast, kicking off this wonderful event here with David and the rest of the folks going to be presenting. Cloud is not here to replace your data center. We're in 2019, approaching 2020. So let's get rid of that verbiage where cloud is actually a direct complement to the data center, right? We're seeing a decentralization of information, putting everything into one public cloud ecosystem. It just doesn't make sense anymore with all of these new kinds of requirements around data analytics, edge solutions, trying to bring data as close to the people and the services that are asking for them. This is why, even in our report, we saw a massive resurgence in data center business, people investing in edge, new locations, and new architectures that are actually bolstering the data center business. So just to put this one to rest, cloud is not here to replace the data center. It's a direct complement and a tool to help enable data center and certainly digital services. Great question.
Okay, I like that. Breaking news. We got that out of the way. Let's move on to IT staffing. So, I mean, I know a lot of companies, they struggle with staffing today, getting the right people to do, the right jobs and with the right level of experience and certifications. I mean, what did you learn in the report about IT staffing?
Man, follow me in this, guys. 4 in 5 respondents, it was almost like 78%, had challenges, at least some type of staffing for their data center. Whereas IT security personnel was a big one, cloud architecture, IT systems and security, DevOps hit number 4. So we know that data center leaders are trying to find ways to better deploy applications, better support those core applications, maybe create native ways to integrate with cloud and other kinds of services. But again, working with cloud colocation experts, new certifications are all going to be challenges out there. My big one recommendation for everyone is, try and get young people into the workforce. That was actually a fun question that we asked. 70% of our respondents said that they are seeing these young people enter into the data center industry, but 34% are having challenges getting those people on board or finding good talent. So it's an evolving industry. There's definitely a lot of help that's being needed out there. Diversify your own skill set. That's really, really important. But good help is always hard to find, but the good news is that the industry is growing and people are actively looking for good folks to fill those shoes.
Good. And I mean, what are your recommendations around that? Any tips for helping to get young people interested in technology?
All right. We're gonna play some mind games here, David and team. So the one thing that I recommend for anybody listening to this, if you're a large organization, getting young people into your data center, into your business is going to be really important. The one thing that I recommend is start talking to colleges and even high schools to tell them about, hey, your Xbox, it's got to run somewhere, right? Or your PlayStation 4, your Nintendo Wii, all of this data gets processed in a data center, and somebody really, really cool is getting a chance to play with some of these really advanced systems. Here's another one. Don't call it a data center. Call it a technology hub or a digital infrastructure, a place where you're just beyond green and yellow and red blinking lights, something that's literally powering the digital foundation that we all use every single day. My biggest recommendation is get these kids excited about what we're actually working on beyond just a server or a computer, but the actual workloads that they use every single day. Start the conversation young, invest in STEAM programs, and please diversify the people that you have within your organization, because sometimes we miss out on some great ideas.
Great advice. Where do I sign up to join the Digital Transformation Ninja Squad?
I'll tell you what, switch.com, that's where you start.
Okay. Let's see, we're running out of time here. What surprising trends did you find in your research?
You know what? A lot of people are investing, and follow me on this, guys, in Linux container management and OpenStack. The biggest thing that I'm seeing out there is that organizations in the data center world are actively investing in how to host and process and manage some of the most advanced workloads that we're seeing in our ecosystems. It was really, really interesting to see that, and kind of refreshing as well that data center leaders are investing in DevSec test ops technologies and tools. They were literally number 2 and 4 on the list. So multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, huge for data center leaders, alongside managing things like containers, Kubernetes engines, Docker, and obviously DevOps as well. Really interesting trends in that.
Nice. All right, before we wrap it up, I want to ask you, what's new at Switch? What's going on?
We're doing some really, really interesting things around edge, digital infrastructure support, and really supporting really advanced, interesting cloud solutions. We are lighting up smart cities with the things that we're developing in our organization. So if you want to check out some really cool, with the world's leading data center, with the world's largest campus, check out Switch and really enjoy some of the things that we're working on right now.
Excellent. And before we go, I want to point out to the audience your contact info. How do we stay up to date on what's going on with Bill?
Hey, let's keep this conversation going. Find me on Twitter at QuadStack. Find me and connect on LinkedIn. Let's make sure these ideas keep flowing. Don't be shy. Reach out to me. There's a lot of really great things that are happening in this industry, and we are at the forefront of a really cool digital revolution. So keep this chat going. Find me out there in social media. It'll be great to keep the conversation going with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks for being on, Bill. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
All right, really cool presentation there with Bill Clayman. Hope that you enjoyed that interview. I know that I did. Before we jump into it with our first presenter, I've got a couple quick poll questions out there for everyone in the audience. You should see a poll question on your screen in the slides window. Should be an easy question to answer. It's a softball starter question, and it says, how many people work at your company? So just select the answer that corresponds to your company, and I'll share the results of this with you so you can see, kind of how you stack up with your peers who are also joining today's Next Gen Data Center EcoCast. So I'll give you a second to answer that. All right, looks like most everyone has answered that poll. Let me share the results with you. And let's take a look at that. So 23% are, I would say, mid-sized companies, 100 to 500 people. We have 8% all the way down at very small shops. We have 19% at very large enterprises, 10,000 plus employees, and then a real good, distribution all in between. Now, one more question before I introduce our first presenter, and that question is, what's your time frame for updating your existing or selecting new solutions for your data center? And for anyone who posted their answer in the questions panel, please use the slides window there. Just click right in the slides window with the answer that corresponds to you or your company. All right, looks like most everyone has voted in that poll. Thank you to everyone who voted in that. And now it's time to get started. It's my pleasure to introduce Calvin Nee, Senior Product Marketing Manager for FlashArray at PureStorage, and Steve McQuarrie, Senior Technical Marketing Engineer at PureStorage. Calvin and Steve, are you with us?
We are. How are you?
Good morning.
Doing great. Thanks for kicking off today's event. Take it away.
We're excited to be here. Thank you so much. Calvin Nee. We've got a great topic here. This EcoCast is really perfect, right? Next generation data center. And I can't think of a more relevant topic than what we're going to go into right now. And it's specific to, it's got an application focus. And so our simple title here, how to give DAS apps, or apps that traditionally run on DAS, the performance, efficiency, and enterprise features with NVMe over Fabric. So let's dive right into this. Modern enterprises really need results at the speed of thought. I mean, it's what they expect, it's what their customers expect, and from a consumer perspective, it's what individuals expect in the world today. And so if you think about the demands that are placed on users, with all these hyperscalers, Google and Amazon just as examples, 53% of mobile users leave a site that takes over 3 seconds to load. And it's not about the web experience per se, or the mobile experience. It's just about what end users feel like they need. And they need answers, they need results, they need actions. And the impact of this, 1 second of load lag time could cost Amazon $1.6 billion in sales per year. And so it's all about the applications and the performance that are underlying the results that you get as both a consumer as well as a business end user.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, the hyperscalers, spend lots of money, have lots of programmers, and really invest in their IT, but they've really kind of changed the game for the enterprise. They've elevated the way applications respond, and now the enterprise has to kind of match that.
Absolutely. And so when you look at the different applications in an enterprise that help to run a business, right, from left to right here, there's different types of storage infrastructure underneath them. So transactional databases like Oracle, SQL Server, SAP, very, very traditionally run on a shared storage, a SAN array. Same with virtualized private clouds, VMware, Microsoft, very, very typical. A lot of customers are on all flash arrays for that. But then as you go across these the different workloads, scale-out databases, analytics and data warehouse, AI and machine learning, test dev environments, it's going to be spread out across DAS, across SAN, as well as even cloud storage. So there's kind of a bunch of different options here that kind of create these silos of infrastructure.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that slide too, Calvin, is when you look at those applications to the right, a lot of those were born out of the hyperscale type of environment, the Googles, the Yahoos of the world. And that's where that DAS and that cloud infrastructure comes from. So it's kind of, again, that pressure that we're seeing from these scale-out applications.
Yeah. And at Pure, we've actually done an outstanding job, we think, in our humble opinion, on the network storage side, SAN and NAS, awesome performance, consistent, shared, reliable, efficient enterprise services, and very much a simplified set of operations. We've also begun to offer that with our cloud solutions as well. So you can you can move snapshots to the cloud, to AWS. Cloud block stores enabling customers, or will enable customers, to do the same kinds of applications that they run on-premise and the features that they get from us, whether it's on-premises or in the cloud. So we're enabling that. But the area that really is a big opportunity are applications that have typically run on direct attached storage. So DAS is fast, simple, and cheap to start with, for applications, but it can be unreliable, kind of a lack of data services across the board for that, and it's inefficient at scaling, right? So let me share with you some of the challenges of DAS. Steve, tell us about this. This is a big area of your focus.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent a lot of time working in the scale-out environment. A lot of my background has to do with some of this. And it's great from a cheap, fast, simple perspective, right? You acquire a bunch of servers, you put a bunch of storage on them, you run these scale-out applications, and they work. But operationally, they are not really efficient. I mean, when you look at the architecture, it's very inflexible. When you buy a 2RU or 4RU or whatever the server size is with a bunch of drives in it, your compute is tied to that storage. And you may be really utilizing the storage but underutilizing the CPU. And then when you need to add more storage, you have to add more compute. So they scale at different levels. So it's very inefficient, and your consolidation there is very inefficient. Then they rely on the applications for the data services, which in a lot of ways means you're overbuying storage. So, most of these applications use some type of replication factor, like a replication factor of 3, so that, when you look at what your storage is going to be, you have to buy 3 times as much. And then when you look at operations, as things fail, you have to be able to deal with those failures, whether it's a server, a storage device, and then how do you manage that? As we look at more automation in the data center, and more APIs, if you're now managing the application, the storage tier, all of those different components that you have to manage becomes yet another touch point in the operational model. So for the hyperscalers, again, they invest in IT, they make money in IT, but for most enterprises, IT is a cost center, and operations is a big part of that cost. So it's something that people have to look closely at as they use these type of scale-out DAS applications.
Okay. And so you were just going into the hyperscalers. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, if you've kind of seen what the hyperscalers are doing, they're kind of the birth of open compute, right? It's amazing the amount of pressure that the hyperscalers have put on the industry in the last few years, and it's kind of refreshing as well. We've seen them change, major vendor roadmaps based on their needs. But when you look at their needs, and again, to kind of reflect back on open compute, you're looking at, well, they need a 1 CPU box with 1 power supply and 1 network card and no storage. Well, that's not something any enterprise would ever buy. But the reason they're doing that is they see these inefficiencies and they want to scale their compute and their storage independently of one another. So they have this idea of, separating everything. Disaggregation, it's probably a theme, you'll hear a lot today. We've been talking about it for years. And the idea is separate that compute and storage so that they're independently scalable. So again, open compute, hyperscalers all have platforms. They build their own platforms for this. Some enterprises can take advantages of that, but most of them are still going to have to buy from the OEMs of the world. So they're still buying servers that, have the redundancy and the drives, et cetera. The idea with disaggregation for us is, let us be that storage section of the disaggregation so that we can provide that DAS-like capability, within a rack, and then you can scale your compute and storage independently within that infrastructure.
So DAS-like performance, but enterprise-type features, which is what our specialty has been.
Exactly.
Okay. And so let's, Pure has been at this for a bunch of years now. We really disrupted the storage industry by providing the first enterprise-class all-flash storage. We've been a leader in the Magic Quadrant for 5 years, and we hope to continue with that accomplishment, hopefully. The phase 1 really was when we went to all NVMe within the array about 2 years ago. With the FlashArray//X product, all of the drives, we pulled out the disk era iSCSI protocols that were really left some latency, even if you had all flash. Now we've optimized that storage internally with our DirectFlash modules and DirectFlash software. And the result has been, pretty awesome. So 4 times more IOPS per gigabyte, 2x more terabytes per rack unit, which really increases both performance and density within a rack or within, 3U, which is kind of our minimum footprint. We already had 2x better data reduction than most of our competitors, but with NVMe, we actually gained an additional 20% in capacity efficiency just by pulling out some of those inefficiencies. 3 times better write bandwidth. And really what this led to was, a whole bunch of, better results with traditional enterprise applications like Oracle, like SAP, Epic, SQL Server would be on there too. And you can see, we're 3x better with Oracle. For SAP HANA, we're almost 4 times better. And with Epic, we have, 45% lower latency and improved higher Epic IOPS as well. So this is all just internal to the storage. This is NVMe within the array. Now, the opportunity for us with NVMe over Fabric is to optimize the rest of the way, right? So attacking that networking fabric, optimizing that, lowering latency all the way to the application server. So Steve, tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you brought up NVMe, right? And I think NVMe as a technology has been a revolution to the storage industry that's kind of just happened. And people talk about it, and there are NVMe-enabled servers out there and NVMe-enabled products. And, most people know what it is, but what it really means is it's, a better way of accessing flash storage, right? SAS and SCSI were all designed for spinning media, and they dealt with the mechanical problems and the physical limitations of that. Whereas NVMe really lets us take advantage. And the early SAS products didn't use NVMe, and that's as you mentioned, the DirectFlash story kind of led us in that path. And what's interesting, the NVMe work group is comprised of several member companies, including Pure. And the goal is to really, standardize this and make it work across multiple platforms and, give us that advantage or provide that advantage to the customers, I should say. And along with the NVMe spec for, PCIe connected devices, which we use inside of the flash array, the idea is also to extend that to the fabric. Agnostic of what the fabric may be underneath, but to say, because of those advantages, we can add a fabric here, and according to the spec, the fabric itself should add no more than 10 microseconds of latency, which when you look at the type of performance numbers, was pretty close to having something directly attached. So it really lends itself well to that disaggregation story. So now you can separate the CPU from the storage and have the storage across a fabric.
Awesome. Shared and high performance, right?
Absolutely.
And so these are some of the results that we're getting with NVMe over Fabric or our DirectFlash Fabric. So with that, you get end-to-end NVMe performance with enterprise-class data services. And that's really important because there are other, very innovative vendors out there, but it's not that we offer just support for NVMe over Fabric and these better performance numbers, which Steve will go into, but it's that we offer enterprise-class data services along with that. So tell us about some of these performance improvements.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, when we first started doing our testing, we figured that there would be customers who were at iSCSI, but for whatever reason that might be interested in looking at, another Ethernet protocol. So NVMe over Fabric, with Rocky here, we started out with an RDMA Fabric deployment, and NVMe over Rocky, specifically RDMA over Converged Ethernet. And comparing that to iSCSI, the latency numbers were remarkable, up to 50% improvement. And even compared to traditional fiber channel at the same speeds, 50% improvement. One of the really interesting thing about the Rocky stack is the Rocky stack provides you that CPU back, right? Because a lot of the offload is on the card. So now that the CPU becomes freed up, the application can use that, which may mean more transactions for the application per se. And I think those are the types of things that are kind of intangibles as you look at NVMe over Fabric and some of the different deployments.
Awesome. And then, so, again, though, we talked about what we cover right now, RDMA over Converged Ethernet. What does the roadmap look like for us?
Right. So our initial offering, which is now generally available, is Rocky or Rocky V2 or RDMA over Converged Ethernet, right? What we're looking at here, and we'll kind of go into this in a few minutes, is some of the direct attached storage applications. But from a roadmap perspective, the NVMe over Fabric's specification is really supposed to be agnostic to the fabric, and we as a company are as well. Our roadmap is to do fiber channel, hopefully toward the end of this year, and we're looking at NVMe over TCP, probably the following year. So that really will give us the entire suite, and that kind of opens up the different type of use cases for NVMe over Fabric outside of the DAS, which we're talking about today.
So DAS apps, like we're mentioning here, Linux as the first operating system that has true NVMe over Fabric support right now, and we're going to continue to support that as the ecosystem continues to mature.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, and so just a quick summary on some of the benefits of DirectFlash versus DAS. We get end-to-end NVMe performance truly now with DAS-like latency, the benefits of NVMe concurrency and kind of parallelism to really give you consistent performance for all your applications. Steve went extensively through the efficiencies that you get, which is a huge differentiator versus DAS, right? So avoid those silos of storage, achieve and leverage the enterprise data services that you get from an array like what Pure offers, and really increase the CPU and storage density per rack. Lastly, while DAS is known for being simple to set up, absolutely so is our flash array product. So it's simple to set up, easy to scale, non-disruptive upgrades always. That's just kind of an ethos here. And with the ability to do Pure even in the cloud, there's an ability to do cloud data mobility between on-prem flash array and our cloud block store product that is coming out for AWS. So really cool benefits there. But we talked about kind of what that DAS latency looks like. So let's kind of kick it in there and talk about that real quick.
Yeah. So what's really interesting, right, is a lot of DAS applications, there's two reasons, right? One is the performance, and the other is, the cost and the scale that people look at in these scale-out applications. Performance is one of the key things that people always come back to when we start talking about, hey, we would like to do it across the network. So when you look at the SCSI or fiber channel zone, it's usually 500 to 1,000 microseconds. And DAS latencies, for NVMe, the 100 to 300, and SCSI, the 200 to 400. What we've seen with DirectFlash, right, is we're at the 200 to 300 microseconds latency. So it really puts us kind of in that sweet spot for DAS type of applications.
Cool. And when that translates down to the applications, while we're even here, I think it's really, really cool that some of the next-gen cloud-native apps like Mongo are getting up to 50% better operations per second. With Cassandra, we're seeing 30% better latency as well as operations per second. MariaDB, up to 33% faster transaction times. And this is with our, the flash array that we've been shipping here for the last 2 years, now enabled with NVMe over Fabric. So these are comparisons to SAS direct attached storage drives. Steve, anything more to add on this piece?
Yeah. We've kind of been talking about, these SAS applications, they tend to be Linux type of applications. Again, that's the reason, when we're looking at the ecosystem, we came out with Rocky as a transport first, because this allows customers to kind of look at those type of applications from a, where can we gain efficiencies? But what was remarkable was really these performance numbers, right? So these were NVMe Rocky versus, SAS type of devices, which most of these applications are deployed on today. So showing this type of improvement, but then again, along with the services like, data reduction, snapshots, backup, all of these things add to the application, which you don't really get, which really starts giving you an opportunity to look at how we architect these applications, or can you architect them different than they're used with scale-out storage.
And I think that's the coolest part of the story, right? It's not just like, oh, well, there's a new technology to get onto and you make things faster. It's like you get the benefit of the additional performance, but you get all these other benefits too. So it really makes sense to take a look at that as a kind of next generation data center technology. And so when we talk about some of these enterprise services that you can provide, snapshots are a big part of that, and we do that very well in terms of improving operational efficiency. So Steve, do you want to cover that? Yeah,
like I was talking about, it starts letting you look at different ways of kind of implementing the architecture, and to your point, it's not just doing it for the sake of coolness, right? Because we're looking at snapshot capability, we can replicate a node, and we can have instant node additions to these scale-out applications. So as the compute comes in, we can already have the volumes ready and all the data there, and instantly scale up these applications.
Super cool. And so here's I feel like this slide doesn't even need much in terms of explanation, but when we talk about what comes down to, 2 to 4 times better CPU density when you pull out the storage from the internal servers, and put them into a highly efficient flash array. You just get, almost 10 times better capacity density, 25% CPU offload, so better efficiency there, and full data services. So this is really kind of what it boils down to. If you want to take some rack space out of your data center, this is one way to do that.
Yeah, I think this slide says it well. And the things it doesn't say is, hey, we're using less power, less heating and cooling, we've got better efficiencies of drives, we're purchasing less equipment.
Great point.
It's a great story, when you look at this slide.
Absolutely. And so we're going to wrap it up here just before we get to some Q&A. With NVMe within the array, we've been able to power enterprise and mission-critical applications. It's not just about the performance, which is what we've talked about today. It's business continuity, it's enterprise data services, et cetera. Now you can extend a lot of that to web scale and cloud-native applications with the use of NVMe over Fabric. So, Mongo, Cassandra, MariaDB, we're just scratching the surface in terms of some of these applications. That's it as far as kind of our prepared presentation. We do have resources available online. Go to PureStorage.com, check out FlashArray//X. There is an NVMe over Rocky for Noobs ebook, as well as for those of you who want an even more technical deep dive, there's an NVMe over Fabric white paper available as well. I think the Noobs book is actually available as a downloaded PDF both on that page and here within this megacast. So thank you very much. Let's see, I think we might have some questions here that we can get into.
Yeah, we do here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we sure do. We have some questions for you. While we pop that up, or while I pop up a poll question, we'll do those questions. So the question on the screen here for the audience is, what additional information would you like about the PureStorage solution that you just learned about? So I'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. And I do want to remind everyone that the resources that you just mentioned, the NVMe over Rocky for Noobs, that handout is available for download. It's a full ebook in the Handouts tab. So let's see, first question that came in here, they're asking, what kind of compression do we get with all flash and PureStorage?
So compression is going to vary depending on the data set, right? So when we have looked at some of the DAS applications, Cassandra, things like that, they are very interesting because, they tend to have the data replicated on multiple nodes. So if each of those nodes are now connected to the flash array, that data is replicated, into 3 different volumes on the flash array, which is going to give us a huge advantage of compression. So we've seen, depending on the application, between, 3.1 to 6.1, 3 to 1 to 6 to 1 type of compressions. And when you think about the number of drives you would be buying, and scale out versus what you would need from a storage perspective on the array with that type of compression, it's a real advantage. So it's one of the intangibles that we get.
That's a huge benefit actually from PureStorage. Is not only the intelligent compression capability that we provide. We actually use multiple algorithms to kind of get your compression of data better even over time. So it's different today than it is 3 months from now, and by different I mean better. In addition, we always have always on deduplication as well. So it depends on the workload. On average in our install base today, we're seeing about 5 to 1, which is typically 2 times better than any of our competitors. Great question.
Yeah, those are some impressive compression stats there. Thank you. Let's see, next question, they're asking, do you support Redis? Can I run Redis with PureStorage?
So Redis is an application, right? And so typically it runs on Linux type of deployment. And from an application perspective, unless an application has a requirement for a specific supportability matrix, we typically don't have a support from an application standpoint. From an operating system standpoint, right? If it runs on Linux, then yeah. So what we're going to present is an NVMe device to the operating system. So we'll take a volume in the array, that will come an NVMe device to the operating system, and then whatever application runs on top of that can simply use that, use that NVMe device as part of the application stack.
And which version of Red Hat are we at with support for NVMe over Fabric?
All right, so in general, it's an industry thing, right? Yeah. So NVMe over Fabric support really requires the RDMA core, the NVMe core for that support. And right now, 7.6, Red Hat, CentOS, and then SLES 15, and I think version 12, release 4, or something like that. Those are the ones we've got the most experience and the most work with. In general, most of the Linux out there, we're from a compatibility standpoint, what we've tested, we're starting to publish those things out on our support page. Cool.
Excellent.
Good question.
Excellent. Yeah, another question here. How are your customers utilizing NVMe over Fabric? What kind of benefits do they see?
Yeah, so one of our early adopters actually was using PCI flash devices, cards within a server, and they were interested in what we were doing with NVMe over Rocky, and they started testing it in their environment for the application. They took, the cards and they compared it to the array, and that became their standard. Now what they saw was that compared to an in-server direct attached NVMe device, they did see an 8% performance degradation when going to the array, because they did add the fabric, some of the latency involved there. Some of the services on the array are going to induce things that you don't see on something that's direct because there's no additional services there. But for them, it was an operational cost and a scale model, right? Because when you start talking about sliding NVMe devices into servers or opening them up and what it costs to maintain those, the acquisition cost, the operational cost, they were willing to take that hit because it didn't really affect their application, but it really improved their operation. So that was a really good example for one of our customers that was really taking advantage of this technology.
Okay. And, technically, how is NVMe over Fabric enabled with a flash array?
Yeah, so it's actually a great story, right? So, we have the evergreen, a policy at Pure. So you're able to upgrade, your controllers, upgrade your arrays. And really all it requires with RDMA is a RDMA-capable card and an upgrade to, the latest version of Purity, which is 5.2. So it's a non-disruptive upgrade. You take a controller out, replace a card, put it in, fail over, take the other controller out, replace the card, do the upgrade, and then enable the the Rocky services. Now for Fiber Channel customers, we talked about our Fiber Channel roadmap. We'll be able to just enable that, right? If they've already got Fiber Channel cards, they're already a Fiber Channel customer, it's simply when we get to that version that supports that, it will be an upgrade to that version, and then they'll be able to enable the NVMe services on Fiber Channel.
Awesome. Yeah, so they can get the benefits of flash array today and then be ready for whenever they want to go to Fiber Channel from an NVMe over Fabric perspective.
Yeah, and the same thing will be true for TCP as well.
Cool. Very cool.
Very nice. Yeah, that makes it easy. All right, well, I think that's all the time we have for the live questions. There's a number of more technical questions I've assigned to you, Calvin, in the queue there if you want to check those out. I'm sure the audience would appreciate that. Thank you so much for being on today's event.
Absolutely. We're glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Calvin. Thanks, Steve. Great presentation. Let's see. Now it's time for the next presenter on today's event. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Clay Ryder, Senior Marketing Manager at Western Digital. Clay, are you with us?
Sure am. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with folks, and good day to you all. I look forward to the next 20 minutes or so where I'll pontificate on a great visionary future, which frankly we all know is going to be a lot harder to do than anyone in marketing will always tell you it's the latest, greatest thing. And we're going to talk about the latest, greatest thing today, but I want to talk about a few concepts that I think organizations across the board would benefit from thinking about when considering the next generation data centers. So, keep in mind the next few minutes here is going to be a way in which to view the future, not necessarily how to take what you have today and bolt on some new stuff and arrive at the future, but really take a vision, of what the future can be. So We're going to go on a little fun-filled ride here, and then, of course, reality is that we will get back to reality as we move along. But that said, title of this is very simple: Building a Next Generation Data Center, or in fact, thinking about a next generation data center. My name is Clay Ryder. I'm in the Data Center Systems Business Unit of Western Digital. Most folks have heard of Western Digital. There's 70,000 plus folks involved in this endeavor spread around the globe, and an awful lot of them spend a lot of time doing incredibly creative things with hard drives and with the solid state drives, flash, NAND, and all kinds of interesting, really geeky technical stuff. Data center systems is about bringing all of that great IP and technology into completed systems as opposed to just dealing with the device or the component itself. So we're a much smaller part of the business, but we leverage and work on everything that Western Digital creates, literally from silicon all the way up to systems. So with that in mind, I think one thing we need to consider in any next generation perspective is the universe of data is evolving rapidly. If we look at the past few decades and compare with the next few years, it took 250,000 years to compute what we could compute in one day today. That's just taking all the hand scribing and thinking back when computer was actually a term that referred to a person, not a machine, and all of the advances in computational prowess that we are embarrassingly enriched by these days. 250,000 years we can do in a day. For the past few decades, less than 1% of all data generated was deemed useful, which means in some respects, we had a 99% failure rate when you look at data as far as its usability. And yet today, we're an order of magnitude up on that. More than 10% of all data generated is being deemed useful. And that's what's driving so much in the way of machine learning and analytics and business intelligence and so forth. Taking that dark data, not malevolent data, but data that's simply unused, and bringing it into great value today. Historically, data has been siloed within applications, but looking forward, we will really see that data is no longer owned by an application, but data is the center of the universe, if you will, and will be shared across many different applications. And historically, data privacy was not a consideration because, face it, it was really difficult to get to data, even within the enterprise. In siloed, locked-down environments, data sharing didn't come easily. Therefore, maintaining the privacy was somewhat implicit of that environment. Yet in the world we know today, everyone's quite aware, concerned about data privacy, and it's increasingly relevant to society, and it's even in many jurisdictions an issue that the governments have dictated how privacy will be protected and what you can and cannot do with data. So we are moving to a data-centric world. We're not an app-centric world anymore. We are a data-centric world. And all of this, really gets to the notion I introduced, a few moments ago about taking that dark data and making it useful in today's environment. How do you unlock the value of data? How do you make your data thrive and become a competitive advantage for your firm? And we've heard, much discussion in the industry as of late about big data, fast data, and now a hackneyed term, but data lakes or data exchanges and so forth. And the reality is that we have data coming from so many different sources, as shown on this page, that first collecting that data is no small feat itself, but then taking data from many sources and using it to develop an insight into your business, to create the answer to a burning question at a moment. And the vast universe of data is growing exponentially. And how we leverage that is going to make the big difference in what businesses succeed. And some of the very key considerations is the shift towards a seamless integration of big and fast data and components and infrastructures so as to extract and deliver the greatest possible value from data. And businesses are looking at how do they develop a data-centric product that can meet their customers' needs, with the right technology at the right time and at the right cost. And some of the great blessings we're seeing from all this is the advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning, streaming analytics, modeling, and other purpose-built architectures that are designed to deliver more precise results from all that data that we're collecting. And as I mentioned, the interaction amongst data is changing. Historically, data was held captive by a single app. But as I mentioned, today increasingly present, but certainly in the future, data is pooled and shared by multiple applications. And the output from one application becomes an input to another. And we have a virtuous circle or change of data moving through any business to help them unlock competitive advantage and to bolster their position in the marketplace. And as a result, we see that there are really new demands being made on the data infrastructure. If we boil it down to sort of 4 key areas that are essential is scale, agility, efficiency, and performance. Just being able to deal with the petabytes of data that are flowing through businesses on a daily basis requires scale that even a decade ago was not envisioned, even for some of the largest firms on the planet. And the agility, the ability to bend process, to reuse data, to maximize workflow, to meet the needs of the moment. What's the query of the moment? What is the one question that a business needs answered? That becomes a showstopper in some cases. And it's not just a matter of closing the books this quarter. It's thinking about, I got a customer on the phone or online who wants to spend money. How do I quickly realize what it is they want to buy and make sure I make it as easy as possible for that transaction to happen? And of course, the more data we have and the more apps we have running, the more we need performance to keep that data processing and moving quickly. So we know how the past works. It works well. In fact, it worked great. Computing in 1965 was a marvel to watch. It might be considered a complete retro embarrassment today. But my goodness, given the tools we had at that time, what we did was amazing. But we're not at that time anymore. We're at the present. And the tools we have today are even more awesome. And the infrastructure revolution we see is we're increasingly moving away from a dedicated infrastructure where we have pre-configured hardware and software to address specific applications and workloads. The last few years, we've seen a lot of interest in hyper-converged infrastructure, software-defined with deeper levels of abstraction and automation. And it's helped solve some of the problems that the dedicated environment had. But the hyper-converged environment, too, has its limitations. And we're moving towards a model that is truly composable, where we have a disaggregated pool of compute and storage resources that can be shared and composed or brought together on demand to be able to meet the needs of workflow, meet the needs of research or business at hand. And it also has a nice benefit that it breaks down the rigid silos of data that we had in the past to where we can do more with the data and achieve more with our business. So with that in mind, let's take a look at sort of the differences of dedicated versus composable infrastructure. And the dedicated infrastructure, as we see on the left, it's what we know. We have a combination of storage media and compute resources and networking resources put together in various form factors, but they're dedicated to what it is that we're doing. Whereas, and the result of that is it's somewhat tidy and easy to think about, but it results in pockets of underutilized resources that when you scale it up ends up into a large amount of underutilized, or dare I say, undercapitalized resources that are wasted. As opposed to in a software composable environment, you can achieve greater economics and efficiency and simplicity at the scale because all of these resources are available to any of the workloads throughout the organization without necessarily ending up with pockets. And as a result, you can get about 40% lower TCO over traditional hyper-converged infrastructure, and even get savings upwards of maybe 50% in CapEx investment, while achieving greater economics, agility, efficiency, and simplicity, and so forth. See, our vision of an on-demand data center infrastructure is one that is open both in form factor and API for the management and orchestration of the resources in the pool. It's very scalable, where you can increase and decrease performance and capacity from the rack level to the multi-rack level, to meet the needs of what the workload is. And those needs can change with the day of the week, the time of the day, the season of the year. It truly scales to be on demand, to fit the need. It's totally disaggregated to where storage and compute and networking resources are available independently to each workflow, so it can truly be optimized so you can get the performance and service necessary to address a workload without wasting resources, truly aligning the cost of delivering the service level and the cost of storing data and applications, and bringing it in line with the value of those data and applications within the enterprise. And the environment needs to be extensible. For the longest time, the flash or the hard drive was incredibly cool because it was far more space efficient than old drum memory. But we know that the hard drive today has taken on a role of extreme capacity and density, but we have performance in flash-based environments. But NAND-based flash is not the end-all. There's more technology coming down the pipe, whether it be other storage class memories, from folks such as Intel or other things that we have yet to dream of. So the infrastructure needs to be extensible and to be able to switch out media over time as we get smarter and more creative in the technology we bring to market. So when we take a look at a purpose-built disaggregated infrastructure, one of the key things that we recognize is we need to have storage resources, which might be manifest perhaps in a flash enclosure. We need to have compute resources, and we need some amount of disk, because despite what some may believe, hard drives are incredibly efficient at high-density storage and very cost-effective for bits that don't need blazing fast performance, but need an incredible volume of bandwidth or volume of data moving over time. And a purpose-built disaggregated infrastructure allows us to distribute those resources as needed across the infrastructure without ending up with pockets of wasted resources that are not available because of how they happen to be carved up. Now, one thing that's absolutely essential in enabling a composable infrastructure is NVMe. And in fact, it's more than just NVMe, it's NVMe over fabrics, because this is what really allows us to disaggregate technologies and resources across a fabric or a network and pool them and split them up and use them as needed and assign them to workloads. Without NVMe and NVMe over Fabrics, we simply would not be able to do this on a disaggregated basis and achieve sufficient performance in order to make a composable infrastructure a reality. But more than just the fabric itself, all of the elements on the network need to be able to communicate with one another. And while basic transport protocols to enable NVMe over Fabric are well underway, and many folks are using them in early or early mid-stage deployments, just having elements being able to do basic communication with each other is not sufficient. You need to take it to the next step. And that really dictates the need for an ability for all of these elements to intelligently communicate with one another. And that gets to where the importance of an API set that allows you to be able to communicate all of these various resources with one another, so you can truly have disaggregated architectures and self-virtualized resources, but also have the ability to discover, assemble, and compose these resources on a peer-to-peer basis across fabrics. Because one of the great things about NVMe over Fabrics is we remove many of the choke points or bottlenecks, which historically have included things like front-end controllers or servers and other resources that are not required in this peer-to-peer mesh that we're able to create with NVMe over Fabrics. And to be able to support virtual system composition in existing the hyperconverged environments and next generation software environments, we need to be able to communicate effectively, and APIs are incredibly important in that respect. And that is one area in which Western Digital has been spending a lot of resources thinking about it and creating some open source resources to that end. When you have devices that are designed around NVMe over Fabrics, we're no longer limited to our traditional perspective of storage, direct attached. We have X many slots, X many adapters we can put together. But the reality is that we can have rack upon rack of flash or compute technologies, or even aggregated disk. Some folks might think, well, gosh, why would you want NVMe over Fabrics for hard drives, because they're so slow by comparison? Individually they are, but when you build out intelligent large-scale object store solutions, for example, with hard drives, you can end up with something that requires a tremendous amount of bandwidth to push the data through, because of all of the heads and all the actuators that you have working together. So there is still a play in there, and it's important to be media agnostic. So in the world of device-based approach, we made an announcement last year at Flash Memory Summit of a solution that we call OpenFlex, which delivers modular storage building blocks unified across a single fabric. And we have the OpenFlex F family or F and E family, which are fabric devices and enclosures. And then we also have the D family, which is also what we call a fabric device that can be put out there on the fabric and made available. We have them tailored towards low latency solutions for support of fast data, as well as high capacity solutions focused on big data. And that provides you with the capability to stitch together storage as needed across a data center in a standardized way, using a set of open APIs to deliver a next generation approach to data centers. Now, all the sci-fi and Isaac Asimov here aside, obviously we're not going to get from the infrastructures that we have today to these infrastructures by waving a magic wand. There's much more than just getting a network up to be able to support NVMe over fabrics in switching and underlying transport, but also applications need to be reconceived or redeveloped in order to take advantage of the universe afforded by NVMe over fabrics. So there are many things that need to change to move this way. But starting with NVMe-based solutions in your storage arrays, for example, it's a relatively simple change out in the networking infrastructure and updates to the operating systems and such to support NVMe not only inside the box but outside the box. But there is much to do in the world of applications as well. But as I said, this was a view of the future, not necessarily a recipe of how you would get there from today, but pointing out many of the opportunities we have. So I'll close with this thought that it introduced earlier, that the data center of the future, is complex, and yet it needs to be open and scalable, disaggregated, and extensible. And Western Digital is spending a lot of time developing interoperability and deployments of products based on industry standards so that we can deliver non-volatile memory and high-speed composable fabrics with advanced storage management APIs so that we can truly have an open, both in form factor and API management orchestration, scalability so that performance and capacity at any scale level is achievable, truly pooling resources so that we don't waste resources, because every dollar spent in the data center that isn't being used is a dollar lost for other investment in the business, and to be extensible and to be able to support the media that we have today as well as support the media of tomorrow. So with that, I thank you very much for your time this morning. I hope this has provoked some thinking on your part, and I invite you to join us with the conversation and continue thinking about what the next generation data center can look like and what it can offer your business.
Cool presentation. Looking forward to the future. I really like the content there, Clay. Thank you. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While I ask you those, I'm going to pop up this poll question. I want to call the attention of everyone out there too. It says, what additional information would you like about the Western Digital solution that Clay just talked about? And I'll just leave that up for you to answer while we do some Q&A here. So let's see, first question here, Joe is asking, can you talk about NVMe over Fabric versus PCIe over Fabric?
Well, I can talk about anything, as you may have figured out. However, I might be also BSing you. I am not really technically in depth on some of this stuff. So rather than make up some kind of BS answer to try to impress you that proves you wrong, I'll say I don't know the detailed difference because I'm no longer an engineer. However, as we all know, NVMe, of course, is based upon PCI, so there is a lot of similarities there. But when you get down to the nuts and bolts of how it puts together, I'd be happy to get you in touch with a more reasonable resource to answer those questions for you.
Okay, good. I like that. An honest answer. Let's see, another question here. How hard is it to leverage NVMe in existing infrastructure? If we already have a data center and storage of some type, I want to move to NVMe. What do you recommend? What's the first step there?
Well, there's certainly some degree of steps that can be made there, and how far you want to step or how far you want to leap, depending on your perspective, is really based on where you're at and what your needs are. At a simple level, you can upgrade storage solutions today to have NVMe-based all-flash arrays that are running NVMe internally and can produce much higher performance and lower latency than SAS-based flash today, and those will fit into an existing fiber or Ethernet-based environment, and so you can continue to use the protocols and applications that you have very simply in that way. So in that perspective, you can leverage NVMe within your servers, within your storage arrays, but you're not necessarily, well, in fact, you aren't leveraging it across the network, because that's the difference where you get NVMe over fabrics. I just will point out to folks that we're holding one of our own webinars on May 15th, which is entitled How to Leverage NVMe-Based Storage in Existing Fiber Channel SAN and iSCSI Environments. And while I will be very host aware here, it's not an EcoCast by ATM, it's just one of our webinars on Bright Talk. But if you'd like to get more information on that, that's happening on May 15th, and I suggest you check that out.
Okay, yeah, sounds like a great resource. Let's see, I think we have time for just one more question, and that is, I mean, this person says they have an existing SAN that's working fine, there's no complaints. Why would someone, or why should they still consider looking at, composable infrastructure, new protocols, and fabrics?
Well, there's a very simple philosophical answer to that, and it proves true in so many parts of life. If you're satisfied with the results that you're getting and whatever it is you're doing, just keep doing what you're doing, because those are the results you're going to get. But if you want to be competitive, regardless of what industry you're in, if you want to be a leader in the marketplace, what you're doing today is not going to make you a leader tomorrow, because your competition is busy thinking about how can they get ahead. So the reason to start thinking about a composable infrastructure is not to solve today's problems, but to solve the competitive challenges of tomorrow. So you need to always be thinking ahead. It's the classic case of don't think about the horizon that you can see. Think about what's beyond the horizon. Where do you want to be 2 years from now? And that's where composability will come into play, because I can guarantee you, if your company doesn't think about composability and how that can give you a competitive advantage, one of your competitors will. And they're going to eat your lunch. And face it, no one likes to cede the marketplace to the competition unless they've just decided to retire. And if that's the case, just keep it doing what you're doing, because you know exactly how big your retirement's going to be.
Great point. I like that. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for live questions. There's a few more technical questions for you there in the queue, Clay. Thank you so much for your presentation today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to Western Digital. For more information, of course, visit westerndigital.com. Also, check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. And before I introduce our next presenter, I want to take a moment to announce our first $500 Tango gift card winner. That is going out to Brian Moores from California. Congratulations, Brian Moores from California. All right, it's my pleasure now to introduce our next presenter. That is Denise Schiffman, Chief Product Officer at DriveScale. Denise, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here, David. Thanks for having me on the webcast today.
Thanks for being here. Take it away.
I will do that. So what I'm going to talk about is how we get from where we are today to composable data centers. And I really believe over the next decade, data centers will transform from fixed static environments to fluid, adaptable, and elastic environments. So the real question is, how do we get from where we are today to that type of environment? One of the key trends we see will be that data centers will look more like scale-out clouds. And this will be driven by the ability to leverage new and innovative technologies and solutions that improve data center efficiencies, while at the same time enable you to deliver new services and capabilities to both internal and external customers. And it's really composable that's going to make that possible. Let's start with the biggest change to data center architecture that we see happening, which is that architecture will be driven by the central focus on data, the creating it, storing it, replicating, and of course, putting it to work, analyzing it. Historically, data centers haven't been designed around data, mostly because we didn't really create that much of it. We didn't have good tools to analyze the data we did collect. And we didn't really have obvious ways of using that data to directly impact the business or our customers. Data analytics was mostly used for business decision support, which was good, but things have really changed with digitization, cloud services, and IoT, as well as all the advanced analytics and machine learning. And so we have all these new data streams or data stores coming to us through sensors and machines, through simulations, through our employees and our customer users, and of course telemetry data, which is data from the systems, the IT systems that we use. And all of this data has inertia, it has gravity. It's more efficient to leave data where it's created, but that's not often the best practice. And it doesn't always serve the needs of the organization. And there are a few other things we need to think about when it comes to architecting the data center and how we're going to run that are impacted by data. And that's one of the big ones is data sovereignty. So there's lots of laws that have come into the marketplace from individual countries that control the access and movement of data, ensuring that data remains in the country of origin, especially personal and privacy data. The other thing we really need to think about is how data will move, because that really impacts how we design the systems and solutions that we'll use. And it's going to be really difficult to predict how much data you will create, store, replicate, and back up. Knowing when, where, and how we will move data across data centers and clouds, share data across applications, secure data, backup and archive data will inform the design of the data center. And ensuring that we have an architecture that is highly flexible and adaptable will be critical. And you'll hear this message throughout this talk. It's because we can't predict exactly what's going to happen. And then the last item around data that I think is important to bring up, we talk a lot about storage endurance. We don't really talk about data endurance. And with the actual importance and complexity and value of data to our business today, we really need to think about how we architect in accessibility of the data so that it remains available over time, even as it becomes less frequently accessed. So we're seeing data centers evolve with big data and analytics and machine learning and AI, and I know everyone is hearing that quite a bit. But these types of applications are starting to inform how we design our data centers, which is another way of saying that IT budgets will move to higher spend on advanced analytics, machine learning, and the custom applications that use that data. Advanced analytics will become one of the most pervasive capabilities in the data center, impacting almost every operation, customer interaction, product, or service. This is because companies can become more competitive and increase their value when they do analytics. For example, McKinsey forecasts that companies will create as much as $15 trillion of value with advanced analytics and machine learning. The real difficulty here is managing the data, which is often siloed. Most Fortune 500 companies I talk to have multiple implementations of the same application with its associated storage. Consolidating from the data from, say, 7 different implementations of Salesforce.com is quite a task. Not to mention a dozen other applications where you have the same problem. I know a big pharma that had 72 different content management systems before they set out to consolidate them. So this isn't an uncommon problem to have. To empower all of the possible data-driven applications, a data center culture that prioritizes gaining value from data will need to become a priority. With the focus on data and advanced analytics, we're encouraged to adopt new technology, new development, and new deployment capabilities at a faster rate because these new capabilities are designed to increase speed and flexibility of application deployment and to enable continuous change. And I'm going to talk a lot about continuous change because next generation data centers will need to encompass these new skill sets and new types of deployments. Everything on this slide, everything from machine learning to Kubernetes to even things like storage as a service. These are the types of capabilities that require iteration, continuous change, the ability to scale seamlessly. So these capabilities require a more fluid IT infrastructure that can manage to this type of change. But current data center infrastructure fails to enable change. It forces us to resist change. And that's where the traditional data center design falls down. The server with local storage inside or the storage appliance SKU purchased is a permanent form factor that can't be changed once it's chosen and deployed. To meet the needs of different applications, many different SKUs are purchased, increasing operational complexity. Vendor lock-in with proprietary software tied to hardware, high prices, and delays adopting new technology hold IT back. So what you get are these static resources, too many SKUs, which increase your operational complexity, and unnecessary spend. And you're spending without getting the concurrent benefit for that spend. We often spend 100% of our budget and get 40% of the value. These are hidden losses, but show up when we can't deliver all the services the business needs. The way one of our customers described the problem was that he kept buying more and more servers at the behest of his team for their Hadoop, but he couldn't figure out how it was all being used up. Then he assessed that it wasn't all being used, but the team kept coming back and asking for more servers. So he just intuitively knew there had to be something wrong with the model, and he looked for different ways of deploying. And what was happening was when the Hadoop needed more compute capacity, they bought the SKU that was in the cluster, and so they were buying compute and storage, and they didn't need the storage. So it was wasted spend, but completely unutilized resource. So when the components were captive together in the same chassis, it limited the flexibility and increased their costs. When we talk to customers and run an analysis on their utilization, the numbers are astounding. Utilization is very low. But that money has been spent, and it can't be recouped. So to get to this adaptable data center design, I believe there are 5 immutable laws of the next generation data center. And this is because you cannot predict the future, and you need a data center that can adapt to whatever comes your way. First law, the law of software separation. Separating software from hardware enables you to purchase and deploy commodity hardware, as well as add new hardware with the latest technology very easily and very quickly. The latest technology is important. Deploying it quickly is important because it increases your densities, increases performance, and that's a way to lower your costs. Buying an appliance means you pay a high price for ease of use up front, then bear the high cost of complexity as you deal with scale, architectural changes, and adding the latest technology. The reality today is that when you buy an appliance, you are playing by the vendor's rules, their configuration limitations, their hardware limitations, and their time to new technology. SAN arrays are a great example of how this works. They have proprietary controllers, proprietary software, and they often don't play well with others. When we separate software from hardware, we unleash flexibility and automatically lower our costs. It enables us to purchase industry-standard hardware and from the vendor of our choice, especially when it comes to storage. Whether NAS or object storage appliances or SAN arrays, these devices are expensive and limited in their configurations and options. We should be thinking of storage as an application, as a service. File systems are software. Object storage is software. Tiered storage also software. And all of these can run on virtually any hardware. The law of resource independence. Resources that are captive in a chassis, captive in a predefined vendor SKU, limits your choice, but most importantly, it limits your flexibility in the long term. It is also where the static data center originates. Fixed and flexible SKUs, fixed and flexible clusters, fixed and flexible data centers. Disaggregation of components enables users to buy exactly what they need when they need it, get the lower prices, and easily incorporate the latest technologies. Components can be reused and they can be scaled and upgraded independently. We can easily disaggregate compute nodes from storage and GPU nodes from storage today. In the future, we will be able to disaggregate memory from the CPUs and GPUs and be able to compose on the fly the exact amount of resources needed by the application. The law of automation. Disaggregation and component-level design require end-to-end automation because, well, in fact, everything requires automation because, in fact, things break, they fail, there's a bug. The systems need to solve problems. Automation removes human error, or it removes repetitive tasks, or it solves for repetitive tasks, I should say. It releases people to do more strategic things, and it has the ability to continuously optimize the infrastructure. Systems are going to get much smarter. They will be predictive and self-healing, meaning you set the policy or the SLA, and the system monitors its health as well as the policy. So it's monitoring the health of the system, the policy that defines how the system should run, and it continuously enforces to that policy whenever it's not being met. The more companies are willing to share their infrastructure telemetry, the smarter these predictive systems will be. The law of data fabric uniformity. Today, we can think about how we will converge specialized storage networks with standard Ethernet networks inside the data center. There have been attempts in the past, probably many. The one I can think of is Fiber Channel over Ethernet. But what it really comes down to is whether or not we need specialized network protocols to provide the performance, low latency, reliability, and security. What Ethernet gives us is leverage, massive scale, and low costs. Ethernet is the standard inside the data center without requiring specialized switches, NICs, or adapters. Ethernet, iSCSI, and TCP are all pervasive technologies, and they can be leveraged in a data center design that disaggregates compute from storage. But as we're going to get to in a few minutes, we're talking about a different kind of disaggregation, one that not only separates software from hardware, but disaggregates the hardware components themselves. It also enables full automation. But back to how we should look at Ethernet. Ethernet performance has improved dramatically every few years with 100 gig standard today, which is more than enough to handle data center traffic, data traffic. But 400 gig is rolling out this year, and 800 gig and silicon photonics are on the horizon. You can deploy applications using storage on an Ethernet fabric with very high performance and very low latency. Add to that parallelized protocols like NVMe, and you can get extraordinary performance over TCP. For the most latency-sensitive applications, InfiniBand may continue to make sense, but is becoming an even more niche solution. Fiber channel SANs, however, may have less and less relevance going forward, mostly because they're expensive. They're complex to configure, and often they can take quite a bit of fine-tuning to get the performance you need. And it will be easier and more cost-effective to use Ethernet. And finally, the law of parallelism. If you care about performance, many paths are always better than one. NVMe puts an end to serial storage protocols found in SAS and SATA. NVMe has extraordinarily deep queues, and prices for NVMe, because we think about it as the Ferrari of storage today, but it really isn't that anymore. Prices are coming down fast. And we've seen data that shows that prices for NVMe could come down by as much as 50% this year alone. I fully believe NVMe will become the standard for storage for data-intensive applications. To take full advantage of NVMe drives, the parallel protocol, the deep and wide queues, you'll deploy NVMe on a fabric, not as local drives in a server, because that's how you're going to get all that capacity and all that performance. It means that you can have parallel use of the drives from multiple servers, and that's one of its biggest values. So what do these 5 laws of next-generation data center design give you? It gives you data centers that master continuous change, because things will change. And when you design adaptable data centers with composability, you don't have to anticipate everything that will happen in the future. Composability makes it very easy to deploy heterogeneous hardware, meaning multiple vendors, to deploy new technology and hardware as soon as it comes to market. It allows you to recover in real time from mistakes in planning, say in capacity planning, or mistakes you make in deployments, because the hardware itself is flexible and adaptable. You can do seamless addition to your existing deployment, so this isn't a lift and shift strategy to add composable. You can actually have a cluster running today with traditional hardware and just stretch that application over a composable deployment. Composability is the way to create your own elastic cloud, created, adapted, and recreated on the fly. So here's a thought. We're moving towards the post-VM data center. Maybe that's fairly far off in the future. But even VMware is hedging its bets with the acquisition of Heptio, a Kubernetes startup run by the creators of Kubernetes. Virtualization created single server multi-tenancy, which better utilizes the resources captive in a server. The objective in the future will be data center-wide resource utilization and seamless automated application mobility, because we are going to want to move our apps around data centers, across data centers, whether those are our data centers or our data centers in third-party clouds. Moreover, VMs aren't really a good solution for data-intensive applications, because data-intensive applications tend to use all the cores on a CPU. So you really don't need to virtualize that CPU. And VMs don't really have the best performance, and data-intensive applications tend to be performance demanding. And since data-intensive applications are eating the data center, it makes sense to start thinking about what happens after VMs. So that leads us to the question of how we get easy application deployment on logical, adaptable hardware. Well, with bare metal to start. The term bare metal can bring up some misperceptions, so let's lay the groundwork. Bare metal refers to the bare hardware, but most commonly includes Linux. Bare metal generally means just the OS, not a hypervisor, no VMs. But we often see bare metal referenced with containers, which are a form of OS virtualization. Containers are much lighter weight and more mobile than VMs. In addition, bare metal often makes us think single-tenant application. But with Kubernetes and containers, this will no longer be true. You'll be able to run multiple applications on the same bare metal hardware. Pretty cool. Linux bare metal hardware, with or without Kubernetes, is the key ingredient to composable infrastructure. When you compose bare metal resources into any type of logical server, you can optimize resource utilization without any of the noisy neighbor performance or costly downside of VMs. Composable infrastructure reconstructs how data centers are architected, and it starts with disaggregation. On the left, what we're showing is representative icons of compute nodes and accelerators and storage systems disaggregated into pools of resources. You can use just a single building block for each of those. So a single building block for a compute node, a single building block with GPU accelerators on it, a single building block for a storage system. And with those single building blocks, you can create this absolutely wide array of logical server configurations for your clusters. Using a single building block completely reduces your operational headaches. Things like when you have SKU proliferation, you have to figure out the upgrade SKUs, because server SKUs are changing all the time. Get them included in your support contracts. You have to spare them. It creates a lot of operational complexity when you have tons of SKUs. You can also choose to use highly dense compute nodes and highly dense storage systems, which significantly lowers your dollar per gigabyte. So from there, you compose. You compose the ratio of compute to storage you want to compose for your application. So for example, you could compose 1 compute to 5 drives or 1 compute to 500 drives or any variation, eliminating over-provisioning and optimizing the hardware to the software that you're running. What you get is the ability to compose low-cost, heterogeneous, meaning multi-vendor, commodity components that become very highly available, high-performance systems. DriveScale's orchestration application is called Composer. It's both a RESTful API and a GUI. What we do is we place agents on the servers and a little piece of software on the storage systems. And the storage systems can be JBODs, just a box of drives, or EBODs, Ethernet attached box of drives. And the software works with Composer so that all the software works together for you to be able to create the logical servers that you want to create. And then we monitor those servers and those clusters, and we're able to predict potential hardware failures. We mount hard drives or flash drives or even slices of flash drives to the compute nodes. We support a wide variety of protocols, NVMe over TCP, NVMe over RDA, or iSCSI for NVMe. And of course, as I said before, we also support hard disk drives. And in all cases, we set up multiple iSCSI paths from the compute node to the storage system, and we load balance across them, which gives us extremely good performance, local storage equivalent performance. The application really can't tell the difference. It's a way of creating parallelism with a serial protocol. And all of this composable infrastructure is completely transparent to the application. And so this is how you would create an elastic bare metal cloud with DriveScale. What you have is the workloads, a bunch of workloads on the left, compute nodes and GPU nodes, accelerated nodes, your Ethernet fabric that everything connects to, and your simple storage systems, as I mentioned, EBODs and JBODs. And what you do is you set in place the types of components you want to deploy, meaning the types of compute nodes, the types of storage, whether you want to encrypt. We automatically create that cluster of logical servers. We do all the work, and it happens on the fly. And so here I set up an AeroSpike cluster. I can easily stretch that cluster if AeroSpike needs more NVMe storage, just like that. I can set up a cluster for Hadoop of compute nodes with storage, and I can mix storage, hard disk drives and NVMe drives, flash drives, together mounted against those servers. If a compute node fails, in software, in just seconds, I can add a new compute node. If a hard drive fails, or any drive fails, in seconds, I can add a new hard drive, and the application continues to run. That allows me to go out to the data center, say, quarterly, and physically touch hardware, rather than having to run out to it the time that the device fails. And in fact, I can actually leave my data in place and detach compute and reuse that compute for another workload. And then when I need to come back and run that workload with that data again, I can reattach the compute and reanimate that cluster. Disaggregated composable infrastructure with DriveScale allows you to adopt new technologies really fast. So the latest processors, the latest GPUs, the latest hard drive technology, any type of new applications if you're building cloud-native scale-out microservices, anything new that you're doing, you can deploy the quickest with DriveScale. Composable infrastructure is the basis for the next generation data center. It's elastic, it's reusable, cost efficient, and really operationally simple to deploy. You gain transformative economics using drive scale and composable infrastructure. 50% lower cost than legacy and cloud, 69% savings in data center footprint, 44% savings in your upgrades because you upgrade your components independently, just a couple of minutes to deploy your infrastructure, and we completely eliminate over-provisioning. And I'm ready for questions.
Really cool presentation. Thank you, Denise. While we do some questions, I'm going to pop up this poll for the audience. It just says, what additional information would you like to gain about the drive scale solution? I'll just leave that up while we do some Q&A. So let's see, this is an interesting question from Timothy. He's asking, you know, essentially, why not put everything in the public cloud and just have a very minimal, you know, on-prem data center storage presence? What's your take on that, Denise?
I think that is a really good question, and I think a lot of people are asking them themselves. And a few years ago, I think that there was some momentum in that direction, but experience is teaching companies that this untethered movement toward the cloud is costing them way beyond their budgets and plans. It's uncontrollable cost. What we're also finding is with data-intensive applications, if there's a lot of I/O, costs can be quite high. And since your data can grow quite dynamically, once again, you can't really control those costs. And so we're seeing lots of customers who started small in the cloud, and it makes perfect sense to start an application in the cloud, and then when you see success with that application, to pull it on-prem. And so, you know, I've even read reports where 80% of enterprises are repatriating workloads back to their own data centers, especially data-intensive applications, because of this lack of cost control or sensitivity over security of their content or the flexibility that they need. And really what we're doing is we're mimicking all of that agility and flexibility and actually separation of components that you get in the cloud and giving you that cost effectiveness and flexibility in your own data center. And you haven't been able to do that before. So I think composable gives companies a real option to run on premises and even save costs from deploying their deployments in the cloud.
Yeah, interesting answer. Thank you. Let's see, another question here. How do I determine which workloads could benefit from composable infrastructure? Are there specific workloads that work better than others?
So a great place to start is you know, the capacity analysis. So looking at your workloads and looking at how much utilization you have in the clusters you've deployed. As I said during the talk, we're seeing most clusters are highly underutilized, and that'll tell you the best place to start. But it usually is in these data-intensive applications like Hadoop and machine learning, NoSQL, and others, because they're traditionally deployed the way the hyperscalers deployed them on servers with storage locally. And that's really causing these sort of direct attached storage servers are really causing the problem of over-provisioning and underutilization. So if you see clusters like that, that is really the best place to start.
Okay, excellent. Another question here, Joe's asking, I think this is a good question. What are the components of the drive scale solution? I mean, if he were to purchase this, is it software, is it hardware, is it a combination of both?
So it is a fully software solution, and as I mentioned, we have an orchestration platform, and then the orchestration platform deploys agents on the servers and essentially agents or software on the target storage systems. But the hardware, the servers and the compute nodes and the storage and the standard Ethernet switches are bought from third parties and from the vendors that you like the most.
Okay, very nice. And then another question here, if I use composable infrastructure, do I need to change my applications in any way?
No, and I love that question. Thank you so much for asking it, because I may not have mentioned this. Applications run completely unchanged, and that's the phenomenal thing about this. It's all Linux-based applications, and I should clarify that, and Kubernetes containers-based applications, which are generally Linux-based. And so the applications run completely unchanged. And we actually certify applications just to help customers be more confident and work with lots of third parties. But every time we run a certification, the application vendor is ecstatic. It runs unchanged, and they're ecstatic because the performance is very good.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that sounds like it would be easy to do. So let's see, that's all the time we have for live questions. There's another question I assigned to you there in the queue if you want to check that out. But really insightful presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Denise.
Thank you so much, David. And I just wanted to mention we have tons of resources on our website at drivescale.com, so we'd love everyone to go visit.
Excellent. All right, yeah, for more information, visit drivescale.com. Also, check out the handout that's available for download there from DriveScale in the Handouts tab on your console. All right, and now it's on to our next presentation on today's Next Gen Data Center EcoCast. I'm excited to introduce Mayank Gupta, who is a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Nutanix. Mayank, are you with us?
I am. Hello, David. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being on the event today. Take it away.
Absolutely. I love the enthusiastic introduction. Thank you so much for that. And again, it's a pleasure to be talking to the IT leaders on the call. And I'm just glad that everybody on the call is interested, that you are interested in learning about modernizing your data center. So as David mentioned, my name is Mayank Gupta, and I lead the product marketing for the core HCI at Nutanix. And before I start jumping into my deck, I wanted to at least give you a structure of how this presentation is going to be structured. So first, I'll actually just briefly mention why traditional data centers, as we know it, they need change. I'll support it by independent studies. And then finally, what I want to do today is, again, it's not just what the problem is, but I want to show you how not all HCI solutions are created equal and what makes the Nutanix solution the best in the industry and the most loved by its customers. So that's the structure that I'm going to follow, and hopefully you will learn and come out learning something from this. Great. So again, the fact that you are all on the call is because IT complexity is hurting business, right? And what happens is IT leaders such as you on the call, you struggle to manage the unrelenting complexity through your IT environment. And this is not just in the core data center, but even remote and branch offices, for DR applications, and much more. And what ends up happening is that this complexity makes it very hard to deliver to the business line. Now, some of the challenges in this IT complexity are stemming from legacy infrastructure which is siloed, that makes it very hard to consume as well as provision infrastructure. As well, it has multiple points of failures. Now, anybody who's created a traditional data center, which is a 3-tier data center, you have to upgrade storage, then you have to upgrade networking, then you have to upgrade compute, and then you have a virtualization layer, and all this vicious cycle just makes it very hard to scale and upgrade. And at the same time, it's got a very large upfront capital cost. But there is a human cost as well. I know a lot of you have spent weekends doing these upgrades, and it leaves very little time for innovation. So we knew that a lot of you had these problems, and in fact, the problem has become so bad that IDC ran this survey, and it's an independent survey, and what they found out is IT leaders and IT admins were able to spend only 20% of their time actually delivering applications for their businesses, and 80% of the time was spent managing infrastructure. This is something what we like to call like keeping the lights on, right? And that's not how businesses are supposed to run, and that's a challenge. Further, what they found is just because IT was so slow in just managing infrastructure, a lot of the times these departments went around the IT in order to circumvent them, again, something that we don't like to happen, in order to get their application. So obviously there was a need to change how IT is delivered. And what has happened traditionally, especially the last few years, is the general idea people think is, hey, let's move to the public cloud, right? And I like it. Right before I came to speak, Denise was also talking about the fact that the untethered move to cloud is not the solution. And in fact, the number she quoted was that 80% of the time, businesses are actually moving some of these cloud applications back on-prem. That's a number which is IDC found out in a survey. So again, it's not a made-up number. It's a real fact that businesses are moving back to on-prem, partly because of cost, because 35% of the time they actually end up overspending on the cloud. Also partly because of the fact that when it comes to latency, when it comes to governance and having some of those regulations that you want, control that you want on your own infrastructure, there's nothing like an on-prem cloud. So this is where the HCI story actually comes in. And that's what I want to talk about. So what if we were able to bring all the benefits of a public cloud on-prem, right? It's almost a software-driven hyperconverged infrastructure, which is where a software makes it very easy to rapidly deploy and enhance your data center. It comes with a flexible consumption model, and it's very easy to deploy, because at the end of the day, that's what IT leaders are looking for, is they want all the functionality of a cloud, but something in a form which is much more composable and much more understandable. And that's where I'm pleased to talk about the Nutanix HCI solution. Essentially what it does, it brings the public cloud benefit to your private data center. Now just if you do not have a history of Nutanix actually started 9 years ago on the very fundamentals web scale principles that a lot of large companies such as Google, Facebook, and Amazon are based on. The essence here is, let's distribute the file and the storage system. And that's how Nutanix was structured. And what that does is, once you have that structure, you have a web scale form. It's very easy to build a hybrid system. Because things are distributed, there is no single point of failure. Now, I want to stress this again and again, because later in my deck, I'll talk about the resiliency of the system and the fact that things are distributed and there's no single point of failure. That is one of the biggest selling points of Nutanix as an HCI solution. We want to make sure that you are not dealing with problems, and that's what we deliver, right? It's a self-healing system, again, because of the distributed nature. And because it's software-based, we can use machine learning and AI to help IT admins manage the sprawl of their infrastructure. So that's what we try to deliver. Now, and you don't have to take my word for it. I'll show some data backing these numbers as well. At the same time, what I wanted to say is, once you have this private cloud, which is almost look like a public cloud, at the end of the day, a true enterprise cloud platform must also, we know that you will use public cloud. We know you will have a distributed edge. So what a good true enterprise cloud does is that it makes sure that across all these three clouds, that your infrastructure is abstracted so that your business stakeholders can utilize resources and data and develop and deploy and consume applications across these multiple clouds. And that's what a good functional enterprise cloud should deliver, and that's what we deliver. And on top of this, as you can see on that little icon on there, that's the management platform. Again, traditionally what IT leaders have seen is there is a management console for storage, there is a management console for compute. And the modern data center should actually give you a cohesive data plane so that a single plane of glass can actually bring all these together. And I'll actually show you some of this, that manageability is also very important, and that's what a new modern data center should have. Now, going back to the point where I said that you don't have to take my word for it, independent IDC research shows some of the reasons why businesses are moving with HCI. So in 30% of the cases, the reason they move to HCI is actually workload versatility, the fact that you can run multiple workloads, different kind of applications on these HCI solutions. Very close behind that, almost in 28% of the cases, is cost efficiencies. Now the fact that you don't have to spend a lot of dollar amount purchasing massive NAS and storage, that saves you cost, and that's very important. Then it comes to the improve of applications performance. Time and again, the applications running on these new HCI solutions run much faster, and deploying and provisioning infrastructure also becomes very easy. So there's a gamut of reasons in which businesses are moving to an HCI solution. So that was almost the lay of there is a problem, and yes, everybody thinks why HCI is the answer. Now I want to dig a little bit more into what makes the Nutanix HCI solution a little different, right? So the picture that I show on the left, a lot of you must be familiar with this. What you see in the bottom is storage. Then you have storage controllers, and then you have networking, which is fiber over, these are Ethernet cables, or this could be fiber cables, and then you have compute, and then you have virtualization and applications running on top of it. This is what we call the traditional three-tiered data center. Now, because this is so complex and hard to manage, and for all the reasons I just talked about, we envision a better form of this. And what we deliver as a Nutanix node is it encompasses all this complexity into a single node. So a single node brings in not just storage in terms of SSD and flash drives and NVMe, but it also has compute and the basic elements of networking built into it. And because we want it very easy to scale your business, what we also do is, once you want to scale your business, you can just keep on adding more and more nodes on it. And that makes the scalability and deployment very easy for everybody. Now, on top of these nodes, you could be running virtualization and your applications. Now, as you can see, the picture on the right is way more complex, easy to manage than the picture on the left. And in fact, we want a step further. What we did is we actually made the virtualization element a part of the Nutanix node, because we believe in 2019 you shouldn't have to pay for a virtualization solution, but it should be baked in as a part of your HCI solution. So at Nutanix, the virtualization platform, the AHV, is actually license free. You don't have to manage an extra license for that, and it comes as a part of the HCI solution. And now your applications can run very easily. And then you can have your you can still use your network switches and scale up your data center. So that's a very easy and simplified way of modernizing your data center. Now let's go into one of these boxes and see what makes this box actually work. So in each of these boxes, so as I alluded earlier you had storage in the bottom and controllers, and then you had several nodes in the top. What we do is, now we take these controllers and we actually move these controllers as virtual machines running on top of these hypervisors. So what ends up happening is the storage that you have looks to all these different nodes as an endless storage pool. So now you can deploy resources as and when you need. And you can actually expand your storage pool as you add more nodes to it. All that will happen is that your storage pool will become bigger and bigger. But as far as your overlaying HCI platform is concerned, they will think that this is just a seamless storage pool which they can use. What you can also see is that your applications and VMs are running on top of the hypervisor. So this is where the workloads is going to run. And the CVM, which is the controller VM, that is where all the magic happens, and it takes care of moving applications, making sure that your data is not just stored locally on that node, but copies of that is stored on node 2, node 3, again in a distributed fashion, so that if something goes wrong, you can immediately build it up. So again, as the bullet points in the bottom says, you can start small and scale without limits. You can increase capacity one node at a time. The CVM is running, it makes sure that there's a local copy of data for maximum performance, as well as copies of data if something goes wrong. And that is the self-healing and distributed nature that is unique to the Nutanix solution that makes the system very resilient. And the other point is that you can mix the node types as well as hardware generations. So let's say you want to have an application, you want a lot of storage. We allow you to do that. So you can find nodes which are lots of storage heavy, or you can find nodes which are compute heavy, and make your choice as to what you want. So at the end of the day, what we are delivering through this is not just enterprise-grade storage, but enterprise-grade security. Now, these are two of the fundamental requirements that are required to replace proven IT infrastructure, right? And that's why you are looking into how do you modernize your traditional data center. It should have enterprise-grade storage as well as enterprise-grade security, and that's what we deliver, right? The Nutanix Enterprise Cloud solution, we routinely replace all SAN and NAS storage solutions from leading storage vendors, at the same time providing a rich set of enterprise class storage capabilities, as I've already shown here. Capabilities like data tiering, compression, deduplication, async replication, and much more, right? And inherently, the Nutanix solutions are built secure by design. Again, we cannot forget security, because security is so important these days. And it's secure by design, and we also, on the security side, we include a rich security features which are state-of-the-art when it comes to STIG security, data at rest encryption. So not in all cases, you don't even have to buy set drives at all the time. So these solutions actually come with part of the Nutanix HCI solution. Now, as I talked in the beginning, the fact that we are putting all of these complexity into a storage node also mandates that we make the management platform much more easy to manage. And this is where Prism, which is our management platform, comes in. And what Prism does, it gives you a single pane of glass to see your entire data center. So here, again, because we have re-architected this, the Prism plane, so that it's very easy and intuitive to understand. In one single pane of glass, you can see, as I illustrate by the green heart here, how is your data center doing? What is, as you can see here, how is the storage? How is the IOPS? How is the memory doing? You can see if everything is running A-OK. And time and again, what we have seen with customers, that now instead of managing 4 consoles, everything is in one place, and it's much more easier to manage your data center. But we didn't stop there. What we also did is now we built in networking elements into Prism. So now through Prism, you can actually connect nodes, you can actually segment nodes for security purposes, so that you can say, hey, this is how I want to architect things. Again, because things are done in software, it's much more easier to manage the networking layer of your data center. Going further, as I've shown here, you can see how your storage is growing, how your compute is doing over a period of time. Something else which I've seen my customers attest to, you can actually do planning a lot. So again, using machine learning and AI, what we have done is we can learn the behavior of your data center, and we can say that, hey, based on these consumption models that you have done in the past, we think that you have a 365-day runway. So we'll actually give you runway and planning capabilities, so that you can plan for day 0, day 1, and day n, and we'll also give you suggestions on at what time you need to add the nodes, you need to add storage, or you need to add memory, and we'll give you exact configurations for that. And that's a feature that a lot of customers of ours love. Finally, what we have done there is, I know, and I've talked to our customers who are managing hundreds, if not thousands, on VMs on their data centers. And what becomes very important is not just give me these notifications that something needs to be done, but allow me to write routines to take care of these challenges. So in the latest version of its Nutanix AOS, we are introducing a concept called playbooks. Again, this learns from your past history, and you get to write in almost like a codeless fashion. It's almost like, if this, then that. What do you want to do if something goes wrong? And with these playbooks, the life of an IT admin and a data center admin becomes much more simpler, and that's what we are striving to deliver in a modern data center. Now, again, even in the previous session, there was a question about what kind of workloads can be done. a good enterprise solution, a good HCI solution is the one which should be able to run all your traditional workloads. And here at Nutanix, we are proud to say that enterprise-grade applications such as Microsoft Exchange, VMware, IBM, even the very stringent ones, something like Meditech, which is where you have very large databases to manage, these have been certified on the Nutanix AOS. And I can say that when you go to select and choosing an HCI solution, these are the questions that you should ask. Is your HCI solution actually certified to run mission-critical workloads like SAP HANA? Again, we are certified to do that. In fact, we were the first solution, HCI solution, to be certified to do that. Mission-critical workloads like Oracle, not just that, Kubernetes and all these VDI solutions. So at Nutanix, we run a gamut of enterprise applications on our solutions, and we are very happy to support our customers in delivering those applications. Also, I don't have to say to this, but again, we are the undisputed leader when it comes to a lot of industry reports in the Gartner Magic Quadrant or the Forrester Wave. We are on the top right when it comes to delivering HCI solutions. Now, this is again an independent study which IDC conducted, and I won't talk about all the numbers because each of these numbers is very compelling by itself. But because I know there are IT leaders and IT admins on this call, I want to speak to one particular number which will resonate to you a lot. And that is the second number from the left, 97% unplanned outages. And again, at the face of it, these numbers would seem absurd, but these are independent surveys that have been conducted by IDC, and time and again, the fact that we have so fewer outages is because we use a distributed data structure, DSF, distributed file storage fabric, and that makes sure that even if something goes wrong, we can immediately build the node that just went down. Maybe the node went down because of a power outage or because of VM going bad or because of a hard drive going bad, and we can immediately build it up because of the distributed nature of our fabric. And so across our customers, every single time people have seen that the storage, the downtime is dramatically reduced, and that's something we are very proud of, and our customers actually love us for that. And that is backed up by our support as well as our NPS score. So for those of you who do not know what an NPS score is, this is the Net Promoter Score. So these are customers who have used Nutanix and who have something, who will actually vouch for the solution they're using. Now, you can go to Google today or NPS today and see that companies even like Apple, who have rabid fans, their NPS score is around 72. Most of the traditional, if you look at data center industry, the NPS score resides around 40. Nutanix has an NPS score of plus 90 over the last 4 years. And that speaks volumes that once people move to the Nutanix solution, they absolutely love it because not only they have less outages, they save cost, and it's much more easier to manage. We also have the industry's best support, in which we have 24/7 support, 24/7, 365 follows the sun support model, and that's where we help you. So in conclusion, hopefully all of you were as excited as I am about the Nutanix HCI solution, and you are here to modernize your data center. A last thing that I had for you is we have the next conference, which is the Nutanix conference, happening in Anaheim 13 days from now. If you still haven't registered, you're welcome to register and learn more about what makes Nutanix the right solution to modernize your data center. So that's all I had, David. Thank you for bearing with me through the call, and I'm open for questions.
Excellent. Yeah, great presentation. Let's see, we do have some questions here for you from the audience. While I ask you those questions, I'm going to pop up this poll question for the audience. And the question says, what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution? I'll just leave that up there, and I would ask everyone out there in the audience to just check it out. So let's see, first question that came in here, they're asking, you talked about the Gartner Magic Quadrant and statistics like that, but I mean, your personal perspective, what's the adoption rate of HCI? What have you seen?
That's a very good point, right? Actually, I'll back it up with two solid numbers. So for that, let me see, because I wanted to not just make up numbers and actually report the industry report for that. So we have seen, IDC ran an independent survey for that almost 20% of the big companies, big enterprises, have started to move to some form of HCI solution in their data center. So, and that prediction was in 2017, but they also made a forecast for 2018 and 2019, and that was again based on talking to these customers. And the forecast said that by 2019, that number was supposed to increase to 40%. So 40% of the big enterprises out there are using some form of HCI in their data centers. Now, the other data point that I wanted to back this up is, this is a Gartner study that ran, is that 5% of the mission critical applications, again, and these enterprises were running on HCI solutions in 2017, and by 2020, they were anticipating that 20%. So you go from 5 to 20. So that's a 4x increase in mission critical applications running on HCI solutions at these enterprises. So yes, this is the way the industry is moving in order to modernize their data center, and not only modernize it, but running mission critical applications such as Microsoft Exchange, such as SAP HANA, such as Oracle databases on these HCI solutions.
Excellent, excellent. All right, let's see another question here. You mentioned in your presentation that Nutanix comes with its own hypervisor that has no additional cost. For those of the audience out there who might not be familiar with Nutanix hypervisor, can you comment a little bit on the production readiness of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know a lot of IT experts out on the call, and if you recall, there was a Linux-based hypervisor called KVM, which was almost in the public space 10 years ago. And what we did is we took that hypervisor and we started to improve it not just for performance, but also for security, and making sure that integrates very well with our management platform. So over the last 10 years, what we have done is we have taken the traditional KVM, which was available out there, and made it enterprise class. So again, in each of our because we're a public company, in each of quarterly report, we actually break out the numbers of how many Nutanix customers are using AHV as their virtualization solutions versus other competing virtualization solutions. That being said, we do support ESXi from VMware, even Hyperware, because we know that our customers should have the freedom to choose. And we don't want to curtail that, and we encourage that. But as far as AHV is concerned, the adoption rate for AHV across all our customers, and the last I checked, we had 13,000 of them, is around 40%. So 40% of our customers actually use AHV for their business critical applications, and they're very happy with the DR, data replication, the security, the management, and the ease that comes with AHV.
Very nice. All right. Let's see. Probably the last question here we have time for. You talked about hyperconvergence and how it makes sense, but for companies out there who have, for years had separate consoles for storage and networking and virtualization and server management, can you talk a little bit about how Nutanix is able to, hopefully converge that into a single console?
Absolutely. And I think when I showed you the Prism console, that is what does. That's what Prism is able to deliver to our customers. You can see your network in the same frame of glass. You can see your storage, how it's look. You can look at your compute all through a single pane of glass. And something else which I also alluded to there is we want IT is these days is asked to do so much more with the same set of people. And that's where that single pane of glass becomes so much more important, that how do you actually present, so the same, how do you present it in a form that it doesn't overwhelm people, right? You still want to have all that knowledge, but present it in a form that I want to know if something is wrong, then only show it to me. So, which is why we show you a green heart, but if that heart turns red, then you can drill down and see what are the remedial steps we need to take it. So, again, it's a balance between complexity of all the infrastructure that is hiding below versus even the respect for the individual who's going to see it and show that, hey, as an IT admin, show me what I need to know and I will take care of things. And that's what Prism does very nicely. In fact, to the people on the call, I would suggest is you can go to the Prism website today, and it has very nice screenshots, as well as we have set up a demo environment where you can see all those complexities, how we abstract in almost like an iPhone, iOS manner, that we show you the relevant parts so that you can actually start delivering applications for your data center and not be encumbered by all the traditional IT messes that you see.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for live questions on today's event, but really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Mayank.
Thank you so much, David.
For more information on the Nutanix solution, of course, visit Nutanix.com, try out the Nutanix test drive, and take it for a spin yourself. Let's see, it's time for a prize announcement before we move on to a final presenter on today's event. While I do that, I'm going to bring up this poll question that says, what is your industry vertical? And you may need to scroll down on the right-hand side to select a vertical that corresponds to your company. So the next $500 Tango gift card is going out to Victor Taranik from New Jersey. Congratulations to Victor Taranik from New Jersey. You have won a $500 Tango gift card. We have one more gift card to give out after our next and final presentation. All right, hopefully you've had time to answer the industry vertical question. I appreciate everyone who took a moment to answer that. But we need to move on. So let's kick off our next presentation. I'm excited to introduce Adam Berg, Global Alliance Architect for NetApp at Veeam Software, and Colm Keegan, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Veeam. Adam and Colm, are you with us?
We are. How are you doing?
Thanks for being on the event today. Take it away.
Great. Thanks very much. Appreciate the introduction. And I guess we'll go ahead and advance the slide here. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is Veeam and NetApp and how the joint solution can drive a lot of benefits for you, both from a IT operational perspective, but also from the business value standpoint. So the first part of the presentation, I'll kind of take you through, sort of what some of the challenges are today, some of which are you're, I'm sure, very familiar with already. I'll give you a little bit brief background of Veeam, and then talk a little bit about the Veeam and NetApp partnership. And then I'll hand things over to Adam, and Adam will take you through some of our joint solutions with NetApp, and then we'll have some time, hopefully, for some questions. So, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because I think everybody knows data is growing, right? So I'm not going to torture you with this, but I think this is probably a slide that is certainly relevant for anyone, regardless of the size of your company. And frankly, these are recent news clippings. And if you look at some of the names on here, I think what that tells us is it doesn't matter how big your company is, how much you have in terms of resources, IT skill sets. Downtime affects everybody. And, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when you're going to have some sort of event, whether it's data outage, data center related type of thing, or whether you're hit by malware or ransomware. So it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it's a question of when. And it's a question of how well prepared are you to recover from that event. And as importantly, how confident are you that you can recover if you have some sort of data center outage. And, when we look at data today, obviously it's growing, but I think what's more important to realize is that the value of data is increasing. So, of course, data is growing, but the underlying value to the business is growing tremendously. And what I mean by that is that there's the obvious inherent value of data for running your business, but then there's the data that can actually be mined and extracted and monetized to generate new revenue streams for organizations. And I'll just give you one example that I read about recently that I thought was very interesting. One oil rig will generate 10 petabytes of data in a single month. And by any measure, that's a tremendous amount of data. And so what the oil rig operator does is they do a bunch of data analytics, and they figure out how they can drive more efficiencies into how they extract oil from the ground, or if it's in the ocean, how they extract oil when it's in deep water. And that generally provides tens of thousands of dollars per month in operational savings, which, is certainly good. But what I thought was more interesting is that these same oil rig operators actually take that data that they get in terms of how they can drive more efficiencies and then sell it back to the vendors that sell the various products that help run that rig. So that's a brand new revenue stream that oil rig operator never had before, but very creatively was able to monetize that. And so that's really where the value of data is. And so I'll leave you with one other stat. IDC stated that data loss events result in about $1.2 million in losses. And I think that's because the value of data is increasing. It's not just lost transactions, which certainly could generate that kind of loss, but it's the compounded value of that data. So that's why it's really important that we find ways to ensure the protection of your data and your applications, and that you can recover them with as minimal loss as possible. So let's talk a little bit about what some of the challenges are. And this slide is a little bit dated, but I think the data points in it are still generally accurate. It doesn't matter the size of the company, small, medium, large. What generally organizations are saying is that the backup environment is too complex. And with complexity comes risk, because if people can't figure out how to manage the environment, or if they're having trouble managing the environment, when it comes time to recover, it's likely they're going to have trouble with that as well. The other thing they talk about is speed of recovery and speed of backup. So naturally, if data is growing and you got more applications to support, and if you're running in a legacy environment that is kind of being held together with rubber bands and chewing gum, then this issue only becomes more prevalent. And so it's something we really need to get our hands around. And so we'll talk a little today about what our vision is as an organization. So foundationally, Veeam backup and replication is designed to allow you to seamlessly protect your applications and data regardless of where they live, whether it's on-prem in remote offices or in the cloud, and give you a single view into the protection status of that information, but doing it in a way that it's a lot less complex. And that's very important for a couple of key reasons. One is you as IT professionals can actually spend your time doing things that provide better value to the business than just doing day-to-day operational management and IT break fix. If you could find ways to save more time from doing IT operations and have more time working with the business, that's going to change how your business counterparts perceive you in terms of the type of value that you bring to the table. ESG is an analyst company, and they did a survey recently, and they asked business owners whether they thought IT provided a competitive differentiator for them. And only 6% said yes. I mean, that's woefully low. And the reason for that is that they think that IT is a bottleneck. They think that IT gets in the way of helping them actually drive new businesses and application services to market. And so while the last caller talked about, a lot of data is being brought back on-prem because it's too expensive in the cloud, that may be true, but I can tell you there's a lot of business owners out there that really aren't that interested in working with IT. So what we got to do is we got to flip the script there and allow you to go back to your business counterparts and say, hey, we want to help you. Well, first of all, we can cover the data protection thing, number one. That's most important. Two, now we can actually help you do things more that are more strategic to the business, because there's ways that we can help you monetize the data. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So what are some of the differentiators that we bring to the table? So first of all, ease of use is paramount. Again, I mentioned before, you don't have time to be babysitting your IT infrastructure. And when it comes to your backup environment, lots of folks think that it just takes way too much time to manage. We deploy very easily into your environment. And I think the best example I can give you is that we have lots of customers that do same-day POCs. And I'm not just talking about small environments either. I'm talking about environments that support thousands of virtual machines, and they have petabytes of data, where they can go and they can deploy our technology. And because we're agentless, we can go in and we can discover their virtual machines, their applications. We also provide physical agents for physical servers. But in short, we can deploy very quickly and show you how easy it is to use our software. And so oftentimes we have customers that do same-day POCs and make a purchase decision very quickly thereafter. The other middle slide here talks about, there's one bullet here that says, it just works. Well, that's what our customers used to say for years, and it was actually a Veeam tagline for a long time, because basically what our customers would say, we just love Veeam. We install it, we deploy it, it does its thing. We don't have to babysit it, we don't have to worry about it. It just works, right? So we want to give you the ability, to put your backup issues to bed and move on to other things. And then, there's the flexibility, right? I mentioned how, data lives everywhere, right? It doesn't matter whether it's on-prem or it's in the cloud. You need to protect it wherever it is. You may have some business apps that run on-prem today, but your business counterparts may decide that, and a lot of businesses are making, kind of a cloud-first decision when it comes to deploying new applications. So they may come later and say, well, this is going to live in the cloud. What can you do for me? Well, now you can confidently go to them and say, yeah, we can protect that. We can do it from, a central, from a central console and have visibility into that data and its protection status so that we can remain proactive. So, in today's world, it really is all about the user experience, and you can think of your own and, who you choose to do business with. And the one example I've been giving lately is Starbucks, because, in the past, I have to say I haven't been that big of a fan of Starbucks. But what changed it for me was the Starbucks app. Now, I don't drink a lot of their hot coffee because I prefer to make my own coffee at home. But when I'm on the road, I do occasionally like to get iced coffee. And, it's obviously convenient to go to Starbucks and pick it up there. Well, when I started using that app, I kind of got hooked, because now I don't even have to wait online. I could be in my car, in my driveway, ordering a coffee in any one of their locations around me, and there's tons of locations around me. And in a few minutes, I can be, at the Starbucks and picking it up, without having to wait in line. And, that just makes doing business really easy. And I can tell you, I've refreshed that card now multiple times. So the amount of spend that I had with Starbucks before I started using that app has changed dramatically, right? So that's what you want to do. I mean, you want to have a great user experience, and consequently, you want to give your customers a great user experience. And so, the testimony to how our customers feel about Veeam is our Net Promoter Score. We're 3.5x the industry average. And I like to say, this is an industry where people love to hate backup because it just gives them so much pain. But we have customers that, that actually, in many cases, do our evangelizing for us. So, I just share that with you because if you're in a situation and you've been struggling with your backup technology, you can be confident that when you try Veeam, you're going to have a very different experience. And so just a real quick background on us. We've been in business for over 10 years now. We're deployed across more than 300,000 customers globally. We're growing significantly. We're approaching $1 billion in revenue annually. And when you kind of look at the research, you'll see that we're actually taking market share from many of the industry incumbents. And there's a reason for that, because we're solving problems that some of the other players out there haven't been able to solve. And so people are voting with their wallets. So I'll talk a little bit about our relationship with NetApp. So we have multiple alliance partners. We work with many of the industry leaders in the storage arena. Nutanix, for example, who just presented, is one of our key partners. We have many others. But we've been partnered with NetApp since 2014. And a year after we announced that partnership, we came to market with integration with NetApp ONTAP. So NetApp ONTAP is really the flagship offering, if you will. It's the operating system that runs all-flash FAS and their FAS technologies. And the reason that's important is there's things that Adam's going to talk to in terms of an IT orchestration perspective that just makes things a lot easier. It really drives a lot of automation in the day-to-day processes when it comes to backup, when it comes to recovery, when it comes to speed of recovery. There's ways that we can actually facilitate instant virtual machine recoveries at the speed of flash to help you drive better, service levels in terms of application availability. And we continue to pour investments into our relationship with NetApp. We actually have thousands of customers now. About a year ago, this past fall, we announced integration with NetApp HCI, which again, Adam's going to talk to. So that's their hyper-converged offering. And so the value here is if you're a NetApp customer and you're on this call, we support the entire portfolio end to end. So wherever that workload resides on whatever the underlying NetApp infrastructure is, we can protect it. We can recover it really quickly. But probably as importantly is we can help you find ways to monetize that data. So we're going to talk a little bit about something called Veeam Data Labs here shortly, and that'll shed a light on that. So this is a a chart from an IDC research study we did a year ago. I mentioned how we have thousands of NetApp customers. So what we decided is we wanted to have IDC do some research for us, and this is qualitative research, so meaning that they actually conducted live interviews with our customers. And basically what we wanted to get was a before and after picture. What was life like before you were using NetApp and Veeam in your environment, and what's it been like, 12 plus months after the fact? And the headline of the research is 286% ROI over 5 years with a 9-month payback on the investment. And I'll illustrate where some of those numbers come from, because I'm kind of a cynical guy, and I don't believe things until you prove it to me. What I would encourage you to do, though, is on your time, go out to this link here. It's a microsite that we have off of Veeam.com, and you can download the white paper, drive application acceleration into their environment, and to help monetize their data assets. Point, how they're able to lower costs, or how they're able to increase ROI. I won't read these. You can, like I said, go to that microsite and look at it for yourself. But be that as it may, I will share one with you, because I did mention how we're helping monetize data assets. There's one case study in there that I encourage you to take a look at. It's a company called Apex Tool Group. And the reason they actually adopted Veeam with NetApp wasn't so much for the backup and recovery aspect of it, although of course that's an important part of it, but the reason they decided to purchase it was because of our Veeam Data Labs capabilities, and Adam will talk to this. And so what they're able to do is they're able to actually build these virtual environments that are totally isolated from production to enable faster application development. And as a result of doing that, they're able to save hundreds of man-hours a year for their developers. They actually have a pretty deep development bench. So they're seeing significant return on an investment there. And there's ways that you can do this as well. If you have application developers, if you have people who are data scientists and they need a near real instant copy of the data, we can service that up through Veeam Data Labs. And that's the power of this solution in terms of not just doing backup and recovery, but allowing you to help the business innovate. So with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Adam, and Adam's going to walk you through some of the capabilities we have with NetApp. Adam?
Hey, thanks so much, Colm. And I want to use the last few minutes we have together to kind of get into the technical bits of what NetApp and Veeam have done together, because there's some real achievements here and some real technical innovation that Veeam and NetApp have achieved together through our many years of joint development work. So this slide here kind of discusses the customer challenges that we went out to solve together. Now, the first customer challenge that we went out to solve was we want to be able to recover data as fast as possible to really reduce those RPOs even further than what Veeam could do on our own with without NetApp's technology. And that's using NetApp's best-in-class snapshot technology. So recovering data, everyone knows recovering data from storage-based snapshots is the fastest way to recover data. So Veeam and NetApp have jointly developed our snapshot orchestration capability. That's Veeam's ability to, from a central pane of glass, to orchestrate application-consistent snapshots of your data and to be able to recover directly from those application-consistent snapshots. The second challenge that we went out to solve together was solving this problem of negative performance impact during your backup windows. Traditionally, backup and data protection is a very heavy application on production infrastructure. So what we went out to do is solve this problem or reduce the amount of impact on that production infrastructure in your backup windows. And in some cases, with our ability to back up from replicated data or SnapMirror, SnapVaulted Replicated, completely reduce the impact of backup on your production infrastructure. So we developed this technology that we call backup from storage snapshots. That's the ability to minimize the impact of collecting change block tracking information from your virtual infrastructure, taking a snapshot directly on hardware, and then mounting that snapshot directly up to your backup infrastructure to talk directly on that SAN infrastructure for backup. This really reduces the impact of your backups during those backup windows. What this allows a lot of our organizations to do is a lot more frequent backups than they normally would because of the reduced impact of backup on their production infrastructure. But backup is great, but we really want to talk about how are we restoring data. So Veeam has this patented technology that we call Veeam Explorers. This is the solving the ability to granularly recover individual application items, individual Windows or Linux files, directly from storage-based snapshots. So Veeam Explorer technology for storage snapshots allows us to pull individual mailbox items, for example, from Exchange, or individual Active Directory metadata from storage-based snapshots. We have a full list of different application items that we could pull directly from those storage-based snapshots. Very, very fast recovery, very granular technology. And the last thing I want to mention here is the Veeam Data Labs technology. This is something that we call leveraging your data. So all that backup data and those snapshots, they take up space, and let's use that data for something other than just waiting for a data recovery. So this is just an included feature in our software we call Veeam Data Labs, the ability to create these self-enclosed labs based on storage snapshots or from the Veeam backup files into a networked segmented lab for all kinds of different use cases. Could be dev test, it could be patch testing, it could be compliance reporting, it could be employee training. Veeam Data Labs is a powerful add-on into the Veeam backup and replication software to leverage all that data that you've been protecting with Veeam, whether it be in storage-based snapshots on your NetApp systems or in Veeam protected data repositories. So let's talk about what this looks like from an architecture standpoint. We really see Veeam as the center of the data fabric. Now, if you're familiar with NetApp, they talk about the ability to move data where it's most valuable to your organization, whether that could be an on-premises infrastructure or a secondary data site, whether that's in the cloud or a private cloud situation. Veeam can be the center of that data fabric in NetApp environments. In this orchestrated view that we're looking at right now, you can see that Veeam is able to, from a single pane of glass, manage primary production snapshots, orchestrate SnapMirror, SnapVault data to that secondary ONTAP system, back up that data off of ONTAP onto a NetApp E-Series, and then tier that all to a cloud provider such as AWS, Azure, or even NetApp's own S3 target storage grid. That can all be done. This whole workflow that we're looking at right here can be completed in just a few mouse clicks. So that's really the power of Veeam and NetApp together, having your data where you need it, when you need it. And not only do we support ONTAP, but we also support NetApp HCI. So we can do these same workflows between NetApp HCI, the cloud, and off-box onto NetApp's E-Series, which is a great target for off-box data protection, long-term recovery, very, very dense, very high-performing storage. The Veeam as the single pane of glass center of the data fabric and NetApp together is really a best-of-breed solution. Some of the new features that are really, really powerful in Veeam's latest release, something we call Veeam Cloud Tier. That's our ability to extend your local data repositories for data protection to an S3 target. This is a completely designed from the ground up unique Veeam technology the way that we do this. So we can leverage the unlimited capacity of cloud or cost-conscious private cloud S3 target to move that long-term retention to a more cost-effective storage. So for example, you could have 2 weeks of high-performance repository on premises and then tier off data on a policy basis to long-term cloud-based S3 target. Veeam's patented technology here it allows for very, very efficient restores should you need to pull data back from those S3 targets. So we make that data at a very granular level that we can only pull back the exact blocks of data you need to complete a restore. So you avoid unexpected egress charges in many cases from some of these public cloud providers using Veeam's patented cloud tier technology. Very, very powerful.
Hey, Adam, real quick, I just want to mention that's also a free feature. So there's no additional cost for Veeam Cloud Tier, and some of our competitors actually charge cloud subscription licensing. No hidden costs here.
Yep, all the capabilities that we're talking about today are all in. There's no nickel and diming you on any of these capabilities. It's all part of what we deliver as a joint solution. And I know Colm really touched on this, but ransomware. This is something that we really see out there, and something that Veeam is very, very focused on our customers in preventing, and should this happen, recovering very, very quickly with minimal amount of data loss. So we've added a couple of key features into our latest release that make use of that data labs technology. So what we've added into our application is something called Veeam Data Labs Secure Restore. So Secure Restore allows you to restore data in a networked off bubble environment to scan for things like 0 days, things that were backed up that were the scanning engines or antivirus engines were not aware of at the time you backed up. Right? There's no point in restoring data if you're going to be restoring that ransomware back into your environment or restoring those 0-day viruses back into your environment. So Veeam makes a seamless process to temporarily restore that data with integrated scan engines to scan those restored files, whether they be entire virtual machines, individual application items, or files. Scan those items before they get put back in production. That's called Veeam Data Labs Secure Restore.
So to net that out, you could have a situation where you get ransomware, use this capability, and then potentially not have to pay the ransom.
Correct. Absolutely. Right. So Veeam Data Labs has really been extended to, the first use case there was that on-demand sandbox, and we've added Secure Restore, and now we've also added something called Stage Restore. So if you've got compliance things, like our friends over in Europe are dealing with GDPR, streamlining compliance is a big deal. So we've got Staged Restore as well. So the ability to, before putting data back into production, being able to pull out personally identifiable information that you may have to comply with various regulations on, before going back into production. Veeam makes that easy and seamless as well. And that's all built on this Veeam Data Labs technology. That's a core component of our application. So for more information, of course, go to our URL that you see here, go.veeam.com/netapp-veeam-digital-hub. That's where you can see everything that we've talked about today and more, videos, reports, white papers, and case studies. And we thank you very much. There's a lot more than what we've talked about today, but hopefully we've gave you some ideas and some things to think about, to reach out to us to learn more and to schedule an easy POC. So with that being said, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to hear from you guys soon.
Great presentation. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Colm. We do have some questions here for you from the audience. While I pull up those questions, I'm just going to pop up a poll. So everyone out there in the audience, check out the poll on the screen. What additional information would you like about the Veeam and NetApp solution? I'll just leave that up there while we do some Q&A. So first question that came in here, and this is kind of a technical one. I don't know if you could answer this live on the call, but I'll just throw it out there because I know I have experts from both NetApp and Veeam, so might as well. David is asking, when will NDMP support from Veeam be available for snapshot management in NetApp?
So that's a great question. So as of our latest release, Veeam does now support NDMP as a backup methodology. Our initial flavor of NDMP is what we're calling NDMP to tape. So you have to directly dump that NDMP back up directly to a tape device as our first support. But we do support VTLs and things like Amazon VTL if you want to do NDMP directly to a cloud target. That is supported today, and keep a lookout for additional enhancements with our NDMP support in future releases.
Okay, nice, excellent. All right, let's see, another question here. They're asking about, can Veeam manage SnapVault as well as SnapMirror replication schedules?
Yeah, and I'll take that one, of course. So one of our key differentiators with our Veeam integration is our ability to completely manage SnapMirror and SnapVault relationships and replication schedules between ONTAP systems. So we have the ability from a single job to be able to create an application consistent snapshot and then schedule the SnapMirror or SnapVault to a secondary ONTAP system. And not only that, we have the ability to then take a backup from that replicated copy. So we can create a complete workflow where we create 3 copies of your data, all application consistent, with an application consistent primary snapshot, a replicated snapshot, and then a backup off box to something like NetApp E-Series or any supported Veeam repository storage in a single workflow. It's very powerful.
Nice, nice. Okay. Let's see another one here. How difficult is it to do a proof of concept with Veeam and NetApp? Is the integration very difficult?
So the POCs are very simple. So Veeam is a Windows-based software only. So we're completely 100% software company. You could actually, today, if you wanted to on your own, go right to veeam.com and download our software and install it right onto a Windows virtual machine. No hardware required. All of our integration can be completed without any specialized hardware or anything. We do recommend, though, to reach out to us and work with one of our SEs. So we can give you some tips and tricks on how to set it up. But you can get Veeam up and running in as little as 1 hour and start doing some of the things like snapshot orchestration, SnapMirror orchestration, and even backup right out of the box. I've seen these POCs even done in under an hour. Very fast to set up, very easy. And we're happy to work with you, too, on that setup.
Very nice, yeah. I remember actually Veeam Backup 1.0, looking at the product brochure for that and considering it for my infrastructure. And you guys have come a long way now. I think it's up to, what, 9.5?
So we're on 9.5 update 4, and these updates are really like major releases. So we've 9.5 has been out for quite a while, and update 4 of the 9.5 is our latest release.
Very nice. And are there any special NetApp or Veeam license requirements if they want to take advantage of the Veeam integrations?
So there's no special license requirements on the NetApp side other than we really want you to have the FlexClone license, because a lot of the power of what Veeam brings from a restore standpoint and the data labs functionality requires FlexClone licensing on the NetApp side. And then from the Veeam perspective, we require the Enterprise Plus license SKU for all of our NetApp and storage-based integrations.
Okay. And I know you mentioned something about Veeam and cloud integration. This person's asking about, is there any special license or software that's needed to use Veeam to get data offsite and back it up or protect it in a cloud?
No special license required there. So that's all included in our package. I believe you just need the enterprise license SKU if you want to take advantage of the ability to tier things to an S3 target. But if you're trying to protect cloud-native workloads, we are available in all the major marketplaces, in Azure, IBM Cloud, and in AWS. And you can start protecting cloud-native workloads without any special license requirements other than purchasing agent-based backup licenses.
Very nice. And I know there's a number of Veeam cloud providers. Is that right?
Absolutely. So not only do we support public cloud, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Veeam-specific cloud providers that we call VCSP partners, Veeam Cloud Service Providers. They run specialized cloud, multi-tenant application-specific Veeam software to support some native integrated features for things like backup to a cloud provider, disaster recovery as a service. So if you're interested in potentially taking advantage of cloud providers, but not looking at the big hyperscalers, look for a Veeam cloud service provider to take care of cloud backup and cloud DR as a service out there.
Okay, excellent. And then one last question before we go. I think you covered this, but I wanted to confirm Veeam can manage snapshots on both NetApp HCI as well as ONTAP. Is that right?
That's right. So we've had ONTAP integration for years now, and we're well known for our ONTAP integration capabilities. And as of our Update 4 release, 9.5 Update 4 release, we added native Element OS support. So that's the OS that powers NetApp HCI and also the SolidFire products from NetApp. So all the great capability that people came to love with our integration in ONTAP, we've now have that as well into NetApp HCI and SolidFire.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have for live questions, but really great presentation. Thank you so much for being on today, Adam and Colm.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. That was my pleasure.
For more information on Veeam, of course, visit veeam.com and also netapp.com. And you can download the CIO white paper there in the Handouts tab in your console. That's entitled Modern Data Management Paves the Path to Digital Transformation. It's a joint paper between Veeam and NetApp. And with that, it's time for our final gift card announcement. We have a $500 Tango gift card going to Brian Munn from Michigan. Congratulations, Brian Munn from Michigan. And before you go, I want to remind you to make sure you check out the 10 on Tech podcast. It's over in the iTunes store. You can subscribe and download all the latest episodes where we interview some of the greatest innovators in enterprise technology. If you're a potential sponsor of an upcoming MECACast or EcoCast event, feel free to reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we'd love to chat with you about presenting on one of these events. And I want to finally remind you to hopefully you'll join our Emerging Enterprise IT Security Innovations EcoCast event. That is Wednesday, May 1st, actually 1 week from now. Look for an invite in your email inbox to that event. If you don't have one, go visit events.actualtechmedia.com and you can register right there. We'll have AT&T Cybersecurity, KnowBe4, and SaltStack on that event. So it's going to be a really cool event. Make sure that you join us on that event. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on today's Next Gen Data Center EcoCast event. I hope that you learned a lot, got all your questions answered, and had a lot of fun learning about building the next generation EcoCast or next generation data center. I hope to see you on the next event. Thanks a lot and have a great day.